Chapter 552. Where's the old master? Gu Yundong felt that his father had misunderstood something, but she could not be bothered to clarify it now. She only said to Aunt Ku, "Yes, that's what happened." Aunt Ku held her forehead. The Gu family had 3 carriages. Could it be that they could not spare one? Even if it was an excuse, they should find an acceptable one, right? However, the little girl in her arms hugged her neck tightly. Her soft voice was simply irresistible. "Aunt, can you leave a few days later?" Kiki's heart aches. Okay. Aunt Ku quickly agreed. "A few days later is fine. Forget it." It was quite sudden to bring this up, so it was good to give each other some time. The matter was settled. But the matter of Gu Dajiang visiting Yunshu and Yuanzi's teacher could not be delayed. As the father, it was his responsibility. The next day, Gu Dajiang took a few cans and placed them in the carriage. In the end, he asked Yunshu worriedly, "Are you sure that your teacher really likes this?" Gu Yunshu nodded affirmatively. "I do. I once saw him eat a full jar and still want to eat more." Gu Dajiang couldn't help but frown. Was it not good for an old man to eat such sweet food? However, since both Yundong and Yunshu said so, it must be true. After everything was prepared, Gu Dajiang got into the carriage. Gu Yundong was also going. She had to go to the shop to look for Zhenggang and Zhuangzi. She had to discuss the matter of opening a shop in the prefectural city. Before leaving, she looked at the Shao family again. Shao Qingyuan still had not returned. Gu Yundong could not help but feel worried. It had been a few days. Why was he still not back? In the past, he had also entered the mountains, but he would return in 3 days at most. It was already the 4th day. If Amao and the other 3 had not followed him, Gu Yundong would not have been able to sit still and would have gone into the mountains to look for them. "Yundong, Yundong?" Gu Dajiang's voice sounded in her ears. Gu Yundong suddenly came back to her senses and realized that the carriage had arrived at the county city. Gu Dajiang looked at her worriedly. "Do you want to go to school with me first? Or go straight to the shop?" "Let's go to school first." Father Tong, who was outside, heard the order and immediately drove to the left. At the entrance of the school, Gu Dajiang got out of the carriage first. He checked his clothes again and again. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he went forward and knocked on the door. It was the same gatekeeper. He knew Gu Yundong and recognized Gu Dajiang. Hearing that they had specially come to visit Sir, he quickly led them inside. After all, Gu Yundong had always been unimpeded when she came over. Yunshu and Yuanzhi waved at them and walked towards the room with their classmates who had also come. Gu Dajiang and his daughter turned around and headed for Qin Wenzheng's study. Qin Wenzheng's servant was standing at the door. He was very happy to see Gu Yundong. "Miss Gu, you're here?" "Yes, my father just came back and wanted to visit your master." The servant took another look at Gu Dajiang and smiled. Young Master Gu mentioned that. "Master Gu, Miss Gu, wait a moment. He'll report it now." After saying that, he entered the study. After a while, there was a rustling sound. Soon, Qin Wenjing came out. "Master Gu, I've heard a lot about you. We've finally met." Qin Wenjing stepped forward and laughed, cupping his hands slightly. Gu Dajiang was speechless. Who was this? Chapter 553. Don't chase celebrities. Qin Wenjing looked up and was stunned when he saw that Gu Dajiang did not move. Gu Yundong tugged at his sleeve. Gu Dajiang suddenly came back to his senses and hurriedly cupped his hands in greeting. Then he said, "Please inform your master that Gu Dajiang has come to visit." Qin Wenjing. Gu Yundong was speechless. Ahem, well, father. Gu Yundong recalled that her father had addressed Yunshu's teacher as old master yesterday. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. "This is Yunshu's teacher." Gu Dajiang's eyes widened as he blurted out, "Isn't Yunshu's teacher old master?" "Dad, who told you he's an old man?" Gu Dajiang paused. "But didn't you say that he was the top scholar a few years ago?" "I read the court newspaper. Every top scholar for nearly 15 years is above 40 years old. But he's only—" He paused and suddenly thought of something. He frowned and said, "There's a young genius. He did become the top scholar a few years ago. But didn't that young man surnamed Qin die of illness? Yuanzhi touched his nose, coughed lightly and said, "If I'm not wrong, I should be that young man surnamed Qin Yuanzhi." Dajiang suddenly looked at him, his eyes burning. However, his body didn't move, as if he was frozen. "Father, Yuanzhi should be quite normal-looking, right? Was he that scary?" Yuanzhi could not help but look at Yundong and explain. "Previously, I did resign for some reasons. There were rumors that I had passed away from illness. I didn't expect this rumor to spread to the Yongning Prefecture. You misunderstood. You're really Yuanzhi?" After a long while, Dajiang finally reacted. His throat was extremely dry, and his voice was hoarse. Yuanzhi nodded. "I'm indeed Yuanzhi. Miss Gu can testify." Dajiang turned his head and stared at his daughter in a daze. Seeing her nod, he couldn't help but ask, "Why didn't you tell me that Yunshu's teacher is called Yuanzhi? I'm afraid father will say that it's impolite for me to call the teacher by his name." There were many rules for scholars, especially when it came to respecting teachers. Yuanzhi was Yunshu's teacher, so it was better for her not to be too casual. Who knew that her father would misunderstand that the other party was an old man? Yundong secretly laughed. When she looked up again, she saw her father looking at Yuanzhi excitedly. The light in his eyes was almost blinding. "Master Qin, Mr. Qin, Mr. Qin, I didn't expect to see you again in my lifetime. This is simply great. You've even become my son's master." The essay of the master's palace examination was excerpted by someone. "I was lucky to be able to read it and admire your literary talent. At that time, I thought that if I could meet you one day and ask you for guidance on the essay, I would have no regrets in my life. I didn't expect it to be true." Yundong widened her eyes. "No, father, the other party is a scheming person without any integrity. He is not worthy of your admiration. Wake up quickly." "Father, well, you've seen Yunshu's teacher. Shouldn't we go?" Dajiang didn't even turn around. No. I still have a lot to talk to you about. If you don't mind, can you treat me to a cup of tea?" "I don't mind." Yuanzhi glanced at Yundong and immediately agreed. Yundong felt terrible. "Father, where's your composure? You're already so old. Don't chase after celebrities anymore, right?" Chapter 554. Wishes are about to come true. Yundong tried a few times, but in the end, she could not take Dajiang away. She could only leave him in the Qin family to exchange knowledge with Yuanzhi. She sighed as she walked out of the Qin family school and looked up at the sky. The power of an idol was so great that her father's personality had changed. It was so great that she felt that her status in her father's heart was starting to become precarious. Yundong turned to look at the Qin family's door again before striding forward and entering the carriage. The car drove towards Gus. Not long after, it stopped at the entrance of Gus. When Zhuangzi saw the familiar carriage, he came forward without a word. It was indeed Yundong. He quickly reached out to help her. After being glared at by Yundong, he retracted his hand in embarrassment. Gus' business was quite good. The Gu family's workshop sent fresh goods over every day and they were sold very quickly. When Yundong entered, there were still a few people watching in the shop. It was different from buying white sugar in the past. Women were more interested in dried fruit shops. Therefore, from time to time, there would be well-dressed women coming to the shop. Whether it was food or sweets, they contributed to a large portion of the sales. The moment Yundong entered, she went straight to the counter. The women were a little surprised. They did not know her identity and whispered a few words. Zhuangzi quickly helped them buy the things. Then, he ran over and asked, "Boss, why are you here? Did you write this?" Yundong looked down and found a few pieces of paper. She raised her eyebrows slightly when she saw the gradually smoothing handwriting. Zhuangzi stuck his head out to take a look and immediately chuckled. "I wrote it. How is it, boss? Did I improve a lot?" He felt that it was not bad. He was someone who was determined to be a shopkeeper. Yundong glanced at him and saw Zheng Gang coming out of the backyard with the account book. He must have gone to check the goods. He was stunned when he saw Gu Yundong. "Boss is here." "Yes, Uncle Zhang. I came here this time because I have something to tell you." Zhang Gang put the account book away. "Boss, feel free to let me know if you need anything. It's like this." Gu Yundong sat on a chair in the reception area with him. As he drank the tea that Zhuangzi had poured, he said, "I plan to open another Gus in the Prefectural city. As you know, although the business of this shop in the county city is good, its demand is limited. There are only so many people in the county city." Zhang Gang nodded. Indeed, he knew that the boss would expand Gus sooner or later. "You've done very well in Gus. There aren't many people I can trust, so I want to hand over Gus from the Prefectural city to you. Uncle Zhang has stayed in the Prefectural city for a few years before. You're familiar with the situation there and is the best candidate. Of course, it will be tiring at the beginning and there will be many miscellaneous matters. Uncle Zhang will have to work harder." However, Zhang Gang was slightly excited. Of course, he wanted to go to the Prefectural city. What was there to be afraid of? No matter how hard and tiring it was worth it to be able to achieve results. He was a man and had some career ambitions. Back then, when he was forced to return from the Prefectural city, the unwillingness in his heart tormented him for a few days. Now that he finally had a chance to stand up again, how could he not be happy? Hence, Zhang Gang quickly agreed. "Boss, I'll go." Zhuangzi, who had been wiping the same spot with a rag, could not help but get excited. If shopkeeper Zhang left, would his wish to be a shopkeeper be fulfilled? Chapter 555. Being a shopkeeper for 3 months suppressing his excitement, Zhuangzi's ears pricked up even more. He was getting closer and closer to Gu Yundong and Zhang Gang. In the end, he simply stood behind Zhang Gang and wiped the back of his chair with a cloth. Gu Yundong was speechless. "Could you be more obvious?" Zhang Gang did not know whether to laugh or cry. He simply asked on his behalf, "Boss, I'm naturally willing to go to the Prefectural city. Then how should we arrange the shop here?" Gu Yundong tapped her fingers on the table and glanced sideways at Zhuangzi, who had suddenly stopped nervously. She smiled and said, "Uncle Zhang, do you have any suggestions? Actually, although this shop has only been open for less than a year, business has always been very good. There are many customers, and most of them are regular customers. Therefore, it's better to use a familiar person to be the shopkeeper. Zhuangzi has been here since the shop opened. He's most familiar with this place and has feelings for it. The customers like him very much. Moreover, he has been learning calligraphy and writing with me these days. He has become more and more mature and steady. He's the most suitable person." Zhuangzi looked at Zhang Gang in a daze. The man's words moved him so much that his eyes turned red. He was usually very strict with her and would say that Zhuangzi was too slippery and not steady enough. Zhuangzi did not expect him to have such a high evaluation in front of his boss. Simply too evil. Gu Yundong glanced at him and smiled. "Actually, I've also considered Zhuangzi as the shopkeeper." Zhuangzi's body stiffened. After these days of training, he immediately understood the meaning behind Gu Yundong's words. Has considered it? In other words, she was no longer considering it? Zhuangzi immediately felt a little disappointed and lowered his head weakly. Thinking about it, it made sense. After all, he was still young. How could he be promoted to shopkeeper after being a shop assistant for such a short period of time? However, he did not know what the new shopkeeper's personality was like. Was he easy to talk to? Was he like shopkeeper Zhang, who taught him how to read and write? Now that he thought about it, he suddenly realized that shopkeeper Zhang was really tolerant and concerned about him. He was usually a little strict with his words, but whenever there was anything delicious or useful, he would give Zhuangzi a portion. The more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. Zhuangzi felt like crying. Gu Yundong quickly added, "However, after thinking about it, there's another choice. No matter what, Zhuangzi needs to think it through himself." Zhuangzi was stunned. He blinked. What did that mean? What was the other choice? "Boss, what do you want me to think about?" Gu Yundong smiled. "Uncle Zhang is right. After he goes to the Prefectural city, this shop indeed needs a skilled person to manage it. You are the most suitable." Zhuangzi's heart, which had just sunk, suddenly came back to life. His eyes lit up. Yundong said, "You'll be the shopkeeper for 3 months." "What? You won't let me be the shopkeeper after 3 months? Wasn't this too short?" 3 months later, I'll give you 2 choices. One is to continue staying here as a shopkeeper. The other is to go to the prefectural city and continue working under Uncle Zhang. You can decide what you want. Zhuangzi was dumbfounded. This choice was too difficult. He was too difficult. "Boss, I have to think about this carefully." His mind was a little chaotic now. Being a shopkeeper had always been his dream. In the previous 15 minutes, this was still his ultimate goal. However, going to the prefectural city did not seem like a bad idea. On the other hand, if he went there, he still had to be a shop assistant. After being a shopkeeper for 3 months, he would be demoted to a shop assistant. Chapter 556. New fellow Yundong took a sip of tea. "There's no hurry. Take your time to consider. Tell me when you've thought it through." Oh, okay." Zhuangzi was stunned. He grabbed the rag and turned to leave. Yundong suddenly added, "By the way, during the 3 months you'll be the shopkeeper. The new employee is called Chen Jinkai. Take good care of him and let him get familiar with the job as soon as possible." Slap. The rag in Zhuangzi's hand fell to the ground. He turned his head and looked at Yundong in horror. He asked in disbelief, "Boss, who are you talking about?" "Chen Jinkai, the eldest son of the village chief." Zhuangzi's footsteps were a little unsteady. The Chen Jinkai who always looked up to the sky every time he saw him? The Chen family's eldest son, whom he unconsciously bent down in front of, came over to be his assistant? At that time, he would probably be the waiter who was ordered around, right? No, how could he think that? That was in the past. Now it was the present. He was not afraid of the young masters and young ladies of the wealthy families in this county. Why would he be afraid of Chen Jinkai? He was the shopkeeper. Zhuangzi suddenly thought of himself standing by the counter with his hands clasped and asking Chen Jinkai to pour tea for him. Oh my God! Just thinking about it made him feel good. Yundong did not know that his heart had been in turmoil for hundreds of rounds. When she saw Zhuangzi's expression, she could not help but ask, "Why? Is there a problem?" "No, there's no problem at all. They'll teach him how to be a suitable and polite assistant. Don't worry, I won't let Uncle Zhang down after such a long time of training." He straightened his back and patted his chest. Yundong felt that his tone was a little strange, but she did not ask further. She just nodded and said, "All right, since there's no problem, prepare yourself in the next 2 days. While Uncle Zhang is still here, if you have any questions, ask as soon as possible. Learn to make accounts. Also, consider the previous question." "Yes, I understand, boss. I will definitely do my best." Zhang Gang also reassured her. "I will slowly let go these 2 days and let Zhuangzi learn to be independent. By the way, I don't know when that Chen Jinkai will come." "Tomorrow. They'll get him to come over tomorrow." As Yundong spoke, she gave some instructions before leaving Gus. She bought some things on the street. Seeing that it was about time, she returned to Qingyuan's school. Her father seemed to be still talking to Qingyuan. Even before Yundong reached the door of the study, she could hear that hearty and happy laughter. She even heard Qingyuan's laughter. The two of them were clearly talking happily as like-minded scholars. They had probably forgotten the time, right? She sighed slightly and simply turned around to go to the classroom where the students were studying. This was not the first time Yundong had come to see her younger brother in class. In Qingyuan's school, other than him, there was another teacher who taught books and a martial arts teacher. These two people were not old. They were the teachers that Qingyuan had personally found. After all, he had a lot of things to do. It was impossible for him to personally teach these students at all times. For example, right now, the teacher was teaching the students in the academy. Yundong deliberately lightened her footsteps when she went over, afraid that she would disturb their studies. Unexpectedly, when she got closer, she didn't hear any sound. The usually loud reading sounds seemed to have disappeared all of a sudden. She was slightly stunned and could not help but speed up as she walked towards the classroom. Yes, there were more than 10 students. Chapter 557. Bian Yuanzi's change, however, they were not studying. Instead, they were playing chess. They were playing chess in pairs, either holding white pieces or black ones. They lowered their heads slightly and frowned seriously. Yundong saw her younger brother at first glance. The little guy was holding a white piece and thinking hard. Opposite him sat Lu Yi. Wasn't Lu Yi an expert in chess? Yunshu, you've just come into contact with this area. Where did you get the courage to fight him? Yundong stood outside the window and watched as the child held the chess piece and did not move for a long time. However, Lu Yi, who was sitting opposite him, had excellent self-control. He did not rush the other party and just waited. On the other hand, Yundong waited for a long time but did not see him place his piece. Finally, she turned to look at the others. Bian Yuanzhi was also playing chess. In front of him was the oldest student in the school, Zhuangzi, who had identified himself as everybody's elder brother. Zhuangzi was very patient. He taught Bian Yuanzhi, who had just entered the school and had a poor foundation, step by step. He even enjoyed this process of teaching. The last time Yunshu celebrated his birthday, he had taught Zhuangzi and the others very gently. It had almost made brother Zhuangzi and even Yundong call him teacher. Now that he was facing Bian Yuanzhi, he used all his patience to tell the guy what to do step by step from scratch. His voice was neither fast nor slow, as if the wind was blowing. Bian Yuanzhi, who was originally a little nervous, slowly relaxed. He followed his rhythm and changed from not daring to casually place a piece to being able to analyze the situation by himself. Yundong felt very relieved as she watched Bian Yuanzhi gradually walk out of the shadow of the old Gu family. She had always been worried that after Bian Yuanzhi experienced those things, he would not be able to open his heart and accept others. He would feel that he was an outsider living under someone else's roof and live cautiously, not even daring to speak loudly. Fortunately, with Yunshu around, there were these cute classmates. When Yundong returned from Wanqing Prefecture this time, she could clearly feel that he had become much more cheerful and confident. Studying was indeed very useful. Yundong smiled, retracted her gaze, and looked at the others in the classroom. Other than a few impatient students who scratched their heads and ears and kept moving their butts, everybody looked very serious. Even though they were not very old, they looked like they were experienced when holding chess pieces. The teacher didn't care much either. He was reading a chess manual by himself. Occasionally, he would raise his head to take a look. Most of the time, he let the students play freely. Finally, Yundong looked at his younger brother again. Seeing that he finally placed the white piece in his hand slowly on the chessboard, she actually heaved a sigh of relief. When it was Lu Yi's turn, he moved quickly, picking up the black piece and placing it neatly. Yundong thought that her younger brother would probably have to wait for a long time. Unexpectedly, just as Lu Yi retracted his hand, he heard Yunshu's clear voice. "No, you can't do it here." Lu Yi was in a daze. He watched as Yunshu picked up the chess piece he had just placed and stuffed it back into his hand. He could not help but ask curiously, "Why can't I go down here?" Lu Yi looked at it carefully. It did not violate the rules. Wasn't it normal to play that move? Chapter 558. My big sister said it. He looked at Yunshu with sincerity and curiosity. Yunshu also told him very seriously, "Of course you can't go down here. Look, if you go down here, I can only go down there. Then you go down here and then follow closely. He'll lose." Xiaoyu, who was playing chess at the side, almost choked on his own saliva when he heard his words. Lu Yi was also speechless. "It's fine if you lose. I'm good at chess. It's normal that you can't compare to me. It's not embarrassing to lose. You've misunderstood. I'm not afraid of losing face. I'm actually doing this for your own good," Yunshu said sincerely and solemnly. This time, Lu Yi didn't quite understand. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. We're learning to play chess, so you definitely hope that the more you play, the better at it you become. If you play with me, won't it be boring to win in such a short time? But no one here is your match, so you're the only one you have to challenge." "Then how should I challenge myself?" Lu Yi asked humbly. "You have to turn the impossible into a possibility. Yunshu suggested kindly. Look, your chess piece should be placed here, so I can stop you. Then do you think that it won't be so easy to win this chess game? You have to challenge this difficulty. Think about it. I made a lousy move, but I still have the ability to turn the tables. Wouldn't that be challenging yourself? Louis's eyes lit up. That makes sense. The people beside him actually felt that this theory was not wrong at all. Yundong's eyes almost popped out. This worked. Even the teacher, who was sitting not far away and reading the chess records, could not help but twitch his lips. He glanced at Yunshu and pitted Louis. As expected, Louis really listened to his suggestion and placed the chess piece in the position that Yunshu had mentioned. Yunshu immediately placed the white chess piece happily. Alright, it was Louis's turn to frown and think for a long time. After 2 or 3 steps, Yunshu placed the white chess piece on the chessboard and jumped up from his seat. I won, ha ha ha, I won. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your support and love for me. I couldn't get to where I am today without everyone's help and care. Especially Louis. He sacrificed himself to help me. I'm so touched. He was overjoyed. He ran around the classroom, his face flushed with excitement. On the other side, Louis was still holding the black piece with a dumbfounded expression. He won? Yunshu was overjoyed and ran back to Louis's side. He patted his shoulder and comforted him. It's all right. You just didn't succeed in challenging yourself. It's not embarrassing to lose to me. Yundong covered her face. No, this was not her brother. However, the teacher could not help but pick up a chess piece and throw it at him. What are you happy about? It's an unfair victory. Yunshu said confidently and puffed out his chest. Then do you think that what I said just now was wrong? The teacher choked. It really seemed to be true. My elder sister said that it's my ability to fool people until they're crippled. The little guy looked very proud. Yundong. No, I never said that. Don't spout nonsense. Now do you know how much you've led the children astray? Qin Wenzheng's familiar voice suddenly came from behind. Yundong suddenly turned her head and saw that her father and Qin Wenzheng had arrived at some point. It seemed like they had watched the entire scene. Qin Wenzheng snorted. Come over. I have something to tell you. Chapter 559. Plans for Dajiang. Yundong looked at Dajiang guiltily. She really didn't. Yunshu had figured it out himself. She didn't teach her. She swore. Dajiang didn't say anything, but his expression was very gentle. He didn't mean to blame her. Yundong glanced at the classroom again before following Qin Wenzheng to the side. What do you want to tell me? Yundong asked. However, Qin Wenzheng glanced at Dajiang and asked her, Your father has already been found. What are your plans for him from now on? Plans? Yundong found it strange. He's my father. I don't need to plan for him. My father can do whatever he wants. Then have you ever thought of letting him study at the academy again? Yundong was stunned for a moment before her eyes lit up. That's right. His father liked to read so much that he could pick up the textbooks and study again. In the past, their family was poor. Now that the conditions allowed it, there was no problem at all. Yundong thought in frustration that she had been restricted by her inherent thinking. After all, Dajiang already had a son and a daughter. He had worked for so long that it was difficult for him to associate him with school. However, this was ancient times. Not to mention that Dajiang was only in his early 30s. There were many people in their 60s or 70s who were still taking the elementary scholar examination. Why couldn't her father? Qin Wenzheng said, I talked to your father for a long time and realized that he hasn't abandoned his books all these years. He's still hungry for knowledge. Moreover, he's indeed very talented in studying. He was delayed in the early years, but now that he's studying again, he can quickly get used to it. He seemed to like Dajiang. Your father is very ambitious. All these years, he has been a small accountant in a restaurant. It's really wasting his talent. In my opinion, his knowledge is better than those elementary scholars. Yunshu's talent is probably inherited from him. He's a good seedling. Yundong nodded. You're right. He'll persuade my father to study. After a pause, she suddenly thought of something and frowned. but there doesn't seem to be a suitable academy in Fengkai County. Qin Wenjing was teaching children here, and he was also very busy. Her father was not suitable to be here either. Dongyi Academy was also famous, but Gu Yundong did not like the atmosphere there, so she did not consider it at all. There was also the county school. However, her father had not even participated in the preparation scholar exam and could not meet the admission standards of the county school. The others were just some small private schools. The teachers were all elementary scholars. They only taught people how to read, so they couldn't teach Gu Dajiang. Qin Wenjing glanced at her and said coldly, "Just you wait." With that, he turned around and left. Gu Yundong laughed and leaned against a pillar at the side. She really waited obediently. Not long after, Qin Wenjing walked back. This time, there was a letter in his hand. The mountain elder of Tianhai Academy in the prefectural city of the Shuanhe Prefecture has some ties with me. When the time comes, you and your father will bring this letter to visit him. As long as your father's knowledge passes his test, he can enter Tianhai Academy. Keep it well and don't drop it. Gu Yundong blinked. You want my father to study in the prefectural city? She had indeed said that to get Qin Wenjing to help introduce her father. But at most, she thought that her father would go to the county to study. As long as Qin Wenjing proved that Gu Dajiang's knowledge was not inferior to those elementary scholars, it was not impossible for the county school to make an exception. In any case, when the exam came, he could just take the preparation scholar exam and come back. Unexpectedly, Qin Wenjing gave a recommendation letter for the prefecture capital. Chapter 560. Going to the prefectural city to study. Qin Wenjing glanced at her. Why? You don't want it? Of course, Ito. She had also heard of the Tianhai Academy in the prefecture capital. It had 100 years of history in the Shuanhe Prefecture and was an old academy that had produced many high scholars, honorable scholars, and top scholars. It was said that the current mountain elder had been an official in the capital many years ago. Later, when he was old, he returned to his hometown and became the mountain elder of Tianhai Academy. Qin Wenjing actually directly gave the mountain elder a recommendation letter. Indeed, it was easy to take advantage of a big tree. Qin Wenjing was really too useful. Seeing that she had no objections, Qin Wenjing nodded in satisfaction. Aren't you going to the prefectural city to open a shop? You don't have to worry about no one taking care of him. However, before you go, get your father to prepare himself. Mountain Elder Qi is very strict. Gu Yundong smiled. I know. Qin Wenjing gave her a pile of books and asked her to bring them back for Gu Dajiang to read. Gu Yundong thanked Qin Wenjing sincerely, but the other party snorted. Bring me a few more cans later. Our Anning likes it. It was obvious that he liked it, but he still insisted on pushing it to his daughter. This guy was indeed shameless. Gu Yundong responded and went to look for Gu Dajiang. The two of them returned to Yongfu village. After she handed the books to Gu Dajiang and told him Qin Wenjing's suggestion, Gu Dajiang, who was sitting in the carriage, was slightly stunned. He looked at the books and did not say anything for a long time. Dad! Gu Dajiang placed his trembling fingers on the pile of books. In the past, it was a rare and luxurious thing for him to read so many books. Now that these books were in front of him and he could look through them freely, Gu Dajiang hesitated. Of course, he yearned for it, but Gu Dajiang sighed softly and looked up at Gu Yundong with a smile. Yundong, I know how you feel. It's just that I'm already so old and have long passed the age to study. I want go to the academy. Gu Yundong frowned. How could he be no longer motivated to study? He was clearly so excited when he saw Qin Wenjing previously and chatted with him happily. Gu Dajiang smiled and said, You used to take care of your mother and Yunshu and Yunka. Now, you even have to make arrangements for your father? You have a lot to take care of at such a young age. Gu Dajiang had been back for 2 to 3 days. He saw the villagers' attitude towards Yundong, visited the shop and workshop, and went to the orchard. Not only did he see the Gu family's huge business, but he also saw Gu Yundong's hard work and responsibilities. However, she was only 15 years old. Her shoulders were so tender, but she worked so hard to support this family. As a father, these were his responsibilities. Whether it was earning money to support his family or educating his children, These were all things he should carry out. In the past, when he was not around, Yundong had no choice but to move forward. Now that he was back, he wanted his daughter to rest and not be so tired. She was not alone anymore. She could rely on him. Perhaps he did not have Yundong's talent in business, but he also wanted to help her share the burden so that she could have more time to rest. Instead of exploiting her and even asking her to spend money to send him to the prefectural city to study, she was already in charge of Yunshu's school fees. Could it be that she had to be in charge of his? It didn't make sense. All right, I'll return the books to Master Qin another day. It's enough for Yunshu to study in our family. Chapter 561. Finally back, Gu Yundong could tell that he was worried. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Father, what are you thinking about?" She laughed. "Don't think that you're adding to my burden. I don't feel tired doing business and opening a shop. This is something I like to do. Opening another shop is an additional sense of achievement for me. I'm enjoying this process." Gu Dajiang was stunned. Enjoy? This was the first time he had heard such a statement. "Father, I know that you want to take care of me and share my burden, but I think that no matter who it is, they have their own path to take. I like to do business, so I chose this path. To me, this is not hard and exhausting work, but a career that can bring me energy, and studying is the path father should take." But how was he going to reply? "Father, if you want to help me, then go to the academy in the prefecture capital. A person can only unleash his greatest strength in his area of expertise. Think about it. If you get a scholarship and even befriend many like-minded classmates, won't it be more helpful to my future business?" Gu Dajiang seemed to be enlightened and suddenly woke up. Yundong had simply provided him with a new idea. Yes, Yundong lacked connections and people with achievements. He was too narrow-minded. Gu Dajiang instantly felt comfortable. He felt as if all his depression had been swept away. He immediately laughed heartily. "Yes, Yundong is right. I'm not as far-sighted as you." It wasn't that he was inferior to her, but Gu Dajiang had always placed his family first. This caused him to be limited when making a choice. Fortunately, he was convinced. The carriage drove all the way into Yongfu village. When they reached home, Gu Yundong told them about Gu Dajiang going to the prefectural city to study. At the same time, she said to Aunt Ko, "Aunt, wait a few more days. When the time comes, Father and I will go to the prefectural city. We'll have company together." Aunt Ko glared at her helplessly and did not say anything else. After dinner, Gu Yundong turned around and went to Chen Liang's house. He instructed Chen Jinkai to go to the shop the next day. When she came back, she went to the Zhang family again. 2 days ago, she had promised Dong Xilan to find a school suitable for Zhang Jia to study in. Now was the time to tell her. Gu Yundong was talking about a private school in the neighboring village. It was Qin Wenjing who had told her. He had met and interacted with the gentleman from the private school and had a good impression of him. Gu Yundong felt that it was very suitable for Zhang Jia. It was not very far, and he didn't have to participate in the imperial examination. Madame Dong trusted Gu Yundong very much and agreed on the spot. She said that she would bring Zhang Jia to take a look another day. After Gu Yundong left, she hurriedly thought about preparing the apprenticeship gift. Zhang, who felt that the canned food was not bad. Look, the Gu family also took canned food when they visited Master Qin. This thing is not cheap. We work in the Gu family's workshop and can buy it with a discount. It's definitely not wrong to take this. Madame Dong nodded repeatedly. You're right. It's definitely not a problem to follow Yundong. Therefore, the next day, Madame Dong took Zhang Jia to the private school with the canned food. She was very excited when she returned. She had always kept a low profile in the village and did not speak much. Now, whenever she met anyone, she had to tell them that her son was going to school. Even when she reached home, the excitement did not subside. Then, she saw Shao Qingyuan, who had just walked into the Shao family's courtyard. Madame Dong was stunned. Qingyuan was back? She quickly let Zhang Jia enter the house first and hurried to the Shao family's courtyard. Chapter 562. Yundong and her father are back the courtyard of the Shao family, which had been quiet for a few days, was bustling with activity. Not only was Shao Qingyuan back, but Mao and the other three were also standing in the courtyard, checking on their prey. It seemed like they had gained a lot from this trip. Seeing Madame Dong enter, Shao Qingyuan handed her 2 pheasants. "Auntie, take them back to eat." However, Madame Dong couldn't be bothered to take the 2 pheasants. She quickly said, "Qingyuan, you're finally back. We were so worried for so many days this time. Let me tell you, Yundong is home." Shao Qingyuan's eyes lit up. He stuffed the pheasants into Mao's hand and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, before he could take a step, Madame Dong grabbed him. "Hey, don't be hasty. I haven't finished speaking." Shao Qingyuan frowned. Madame Dong lowered her voice slightly. "Not only is Yundong back, but her father is also back." Shao Qingyuan paused and asked uncertainly, "Her father? You're saying that Uncle Gu has been found? Isn't that so? We've all seen him. I heard from Yundong that she met him at Wanqing Prefecture. His father hasn't given up on looking for them for so long. Now the family has finally reunited." Madame Dong sighed. "You're the future son-in-law of the Gu family now. This is the first time you'll see your future father-in-law. How can you look like this? You have to leave a good impression on him, right?" Shao Qingyuan had just returned from the deep mountains and was still sweating. Not only were his clothes wet, but they were also tattered. His hair was like a hen's nest. He had definitely not taken a shower in the past few days. Gu Dajiang was a scholar. He would definitely be dissatisfied if Shao Qingyuan appeared in front of him like this. Madame Dong knew that Shao Qingyuan didn't look pretty every time he returned from the mountains, so she quickly came over to remind him. Shao Qingyuan looked down and nodded. "I'll go clean up." He turned around to get a set of clothes and went straight to the bathroom. Madame Dong heaved a sigh of relief and looked at the prey in the courtyard. Although they had been in the mountain for a long time and there was a lot of small prey, she did not see any big guys. However, there seemed to be 2 large boxes of herbs in the corner. Did Qingyuan pick them? Madame Dong was still looking when Mao and the others surrounded her. "Auntie Dong, has Miss Father really been found? Have you seen him? What kind of person is he?" Needless to say, just by looking at the girl, you should know that her father is definitely not bad-looking. "Who asked about his appearance?" "I'm asking about his temperament." "Do you know his temperament?" "If our young master wants to see his father-in-law, shouldn't we ask around first?" Madame Dong's ears were buzzing as she listened to their conversation. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, "I didn't talk much to her father either. How would I know what kind of personality he has? However, her father should be someone who values family and friends. I heard that when he was in Wanqing Prefecture, he would rather not eat or drink in order to save money just to find Yundong and the others. My husband did talk to him. He said that although he's a scholar, he doesn't look down on us bumpkins. He's a person who's easy to get along with and doesn't put on any airs." When Mao and the other 3 heard this, they immediately smiled. "Then I'm relieved. Uncle Gu will definitely be satisfied with our young master's character." "That's right. Our young master is responsible, loyal, and earns lots of money. Most importantly, he listens to Mississippi. There's nothing to be picky about. If he misses this son-in-law, how can he find a better one?" Chapter 563. Rejected Madame Dong was originally a little nervous, but after hearing their words, she felt that it made sense and immediately became confident. Qingyuan was a good person. Why would a woman marry? Wasn't it just because she wanted her man to treat her well? Qingyuan had nothing to say to Yundong. He heard that when Yundong wanted to open a workshop, Qingyuan gave out all his savings without a word and did not leave a single cent for himself. Yundong's blueprint was taken away by the young master of the Peng family. Qingyuan chased after him without thinking. Yundong's mother was sick and still lacked an herb. These days, Qingyuan went into the mountains to look for it every few days. When Yundong wasn't around, it wasn't that no one came to cause trouble for the workshop. They just wanted to make a scene while Yundong wasn't around. It was all settled by Qingyuan. Madame Dong felt that no man in the entire Fengkai County would treat a woman so well, let alone Yongfu village. Even when her mother-in-law was still around when they first got married, the mother-in-law controlled the family's money and secretly hid it from her. She was furious. Therefore, Dajiang would definitely be satisfied with Shao Qingyuan. At this moment, Zhang Hu was not around. Otherwise, he would definitely stand in the shoes of an old father and tell her, Bulsh *T. While they were talking, Shao Qingyuan had finally tidied up. When he came out, he was refreshed and looked especially young and energetic. Madame Dong nodded. Yes, not bad. He even put on new clothes. Shao Qingyuan went back to his room to get the wine. Lu Wei had left it here. He said that it was ridiculous that he didn't even have wine in his house as a man. Then, he brought 2 jars of wine over the next day. Shao Qingyuan had never drunk it before. He didn't like it, but it was just right to send it to his future father-in-law. In addition to the wine, he also carried the wild chickens and rabbits. It was a pity that there were no good books, calligraphy, or paintings at home. If he wanted to suit his father-in-law, that would be the most suitable. Madame Dong, on the other hand, felt that there was no problem. There was wine and meat. It was already very good in the countryside. However, before Shao Qingyuan left the courtyard, he suddenly stopped. As if he had thought of something, he quickly returned to his room. When he came out again, he was holding a wooden box in his arms. Others didn't know what was inside, but it looked quite expensive. Only then did Shao Qingyuan slowly exhale and walk towards the Gu residence. At the Gu family's entrance, Dajiang stood there with a cold expression. When Shao Qingyuan returned, many people in the village saw them carrying a lot of prey. Dajiang had originally planned to stroll around the fruit forest, but when he heard the news on the way, he returned without a word. Who knew that even after waiting for half a day, Shao Qingyuan didn't come to visit? Alright, this guy wanted to marry his daughter with this attitude? No way. From afar, Shao Qingyuan saw Dajiang looking at him coldly. Uncle Gu. Shao Qingyuan recognized him at a glance. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief and suppressed the nervousness that suddenly surged up. He walked up to him and said, Shao Qingyuan, Yundongs. Before he could finish speaking, Dajiang interrupted him. Oh, Shao Qingyuan, right? I understand. You can leave now. Shao Qingyuan frowned. Uncle Gu. Dajiang turned around and walked straight into the Gu residence. Chapter 564. Meeting Fiance again. When Shao Qingyuan wanted to follow him in, the door was suddenly closed and there was no more movement. He pursed his lips and sighed inwardly. True enough. He did not say anything and did not knock on the door. He just stood outside the door and faced the Gu family's house. Madame Dong, Mao, and the others were all shocked. They stood at the corner and looked at each other, talking softly. What's going on? Didn't they say that Uncle Gu is easy to talk to? Why did you close the door directly? He doesn't even have time to understand our young master's character. That's right. I think you might not know that our young master has been rejected. Don't all actors sing like this? As fathers, they look down on poor boys, so they deliberately don't let the two of them meet and take the opportunity to break them up. But our young master isn't poor, right? Compared to young Master Lu in the county, he's poor. Could it be that Uncle Gu wants to matchmake Miss with the young master of the Lu family? Everyone turned their heads and looked at Shu, who was the last to speak. In the end, Mao said, Let's go and bring young master back first. Then we can sit down and discuss how to enter the Gu family. As he spoke, he was about to walk towards Shao Qingyuan. Unfortunately, Madame Dong pulled him back. What are you going to do? She glared at them. Can't you tell? That's a test for our future father-in-law, understand? There are also families in our village who dote on their daughters. They will deliberately make things difficult for their son-in-law when he comes for the first time. Is that so? Madame Dong nodded affirmatively. That's right. When the 6th grandfather in our village married his daughter, he asked the groom to help him with half a day's work. Yundong's father is a refined man, so he won't torture Qingyuan like this. I reckon he'll just stand outside for a while to test his patience. How long will that take? Madame Dong was not sure about this. It shouldn't be long. As she spoke, she raised her head and looked at the scorching sun above her, feeling a little worried. The sun was so bright and the weather was so hot. She hoped that he would not get a heat stroke later. No, she had to go back and prepare some honeysuckle. Seeing that she had left, Mao and the other three looked at each other with even more worry in their eyes. At the same time, in the Gu family's courtyard, Gu Yundong also looked helplessly at her father's back as he returned to his room. She wanted to say something, but Aunt Ke pulled her back. Don't add fuel to the fire. Let me tell you, if you speak up for Shao Qingyuan, he will have to stand outside for another 2 hours. Do you believe me? Of course, Gu Yundong believed her. But in this weather, he just came back from the mountains. He won't be able to take it later. Aunt Ke glanced at her. Even if he can't take it, he has to deal with it. If he wants to marry someone else's daughter, it won't make sense if he doesn't suffer a little. Besides, someone like Shao Qingyuan will be fine standing under the sun for the entire day. Don't worry. In the past, Aunt Ke could not interfere too much in Gu Yundong's private matters because of her status. Otherwise, she would have wanted to make things difficult for Shao Qingyuan. The main reason was that Gu Yundong was too disappointing. She had given herself away so easily. Now that Gu Dajiang was back, as a father, he had to let Shao Qingyuan know that the Gu family's daughter was a treasure. She couldn't be casually married. The harder it was to obtain, the more one knew how to cherish it. Gu Yundong could only sit back down. She could not go out to take a look either. On the other hand, Gu Yunshu, who was resting at home, stole a glance outside. Then, he hurriedly ran to Gu Dajiang's room and asked him, "Father, are you making things difficult for my brother Shao because of eldest sister's previous fiancé?" Chapter 565. What happened? Gu Dajiang? Gu Yundong, who had just walked over. Fiance? Oh right, the last time Shao Qingyuan followed her to the Yongning Prefecture. He had asked her about this and said that Yunshu had told him. At that time, Gu Yundong thought that it was just Yunshu's joke and did not take it seriously. When she got home, she was so busy that she forgot. She really did not expect to hear the word fiancé from Yunshu again. Gu Dajiang was equally dumbfounded. He felt terrible. Shao Qingyuan had yet to be dealt with, and now there was an inexplicable fiancé? He pulled Gu Yunshu in front of him. Tell me in detail. What do you mean by eldest sister's ex-fiancé? Did your eldest sister have a fiancé in the past? Gu Yunshu blinked and looked innocent. No, but I heard it with my own ears. Did I remember wrongly? He began to doubt himself. Gu Dajiang said, "When did you hear it? Where did you hear it? Who did you hear it from? Come, tell me everything." Last year, when we were in Gu village, didn't Grandpa and Grandma tell Dad that they engaged eldest sister to someone? They even said that the person was from town and gave them the money. Gu Dajiang frowned. Then his expression turned especially ugly. Engaged? That was all old Gu and Madame Zhao's wishful thinking. Moreover, he wasn't her fiancé. They were obviously trying to sell Yundong out. The family in town had arranged a marriage for an old man in his 50s. He was old enough to be Yundong's grandfather, yet he still dared to marry a 14-year-old girl. Gu Dajiang knew that old Gu and the others wouldn't find a good husband for Yundong, but he didn't expect them to want to sell Yundong for 5 taels of silver. What fiancé? He spat. Gu Dajiang rejected it on the spot. He threatened that if old Gu dared to do such a thing again, he would rather die together with everyone than let his daughter jump into the fire pit. Old Gu was furious at that time. He even said that it was for his own good. He took back the 5 taels of silver to treat Madame Yang. Gu Dajiang didn't listen at all. He even went to town to beat up that old thing who coveted his daughter. At that time, this matter had not spread out in the Gu family, but he did not expect Gu Yunshu to hear about it. The problem was that this person was only half listening. Gu Dajiang rubbed his forehead. No, your sister didn't have a fiancé in the past. That was your grandparents acting on their own. It doesn't count. Yunshu, don't mention this again in the future. Otherwise, if others hear about it, it won't be good for your sister, understand? Oh, Gu Yundong nodded. I only told Brother Shao once. I won't say it again. Then, he thought for a moment and asked the previous question. Then why did Father make things difficult for my brother Shao? Are you going to break them up? Why? My brother Shao is such a good person. Gu Yunka ran in and nodded. Yes, elder brother Shao is great. Gu Dajiang felt terrible. It was fine if it was the eldest daughter, but why was his son and youngest daughter subdued by him? However, Madame Yang seemed to understand and nodded. He's great. Gu Dajiang felt that his family had lost. He needed to hold on to the last line. Gu Yundong did not dare to speak anymore. Indeed, the more she praised Shao Qingyuan, the angrier her father became. Chapter 566. Note, however, seeing that the weather was getting hotter, Gu Yundong began to feel uneasy. Aunt Ku pulled her over. It's fine, it's fine. I just went to take a look. He just sweated a little too much, but he's still very energetic. Gu Yundong nodded randomly. No one knew if she was listening. However, at this moment, Madame Cui came over to let them have lunch. This meant that Shao Qingyuan had been standing outside for 2 hours. It would only get hotter when it was noon. She followed Gu Dajiang to the dining hall, but she couldn't eat much. She only ate some porridge. Gu Dajiang looked up at her and sighed inwardly. This silly girl. She was clearly so steady when doing business. Why was she unable to hold it in now? He shook his head and pretended not to see it. He turned around and picked up a pork rib for Madame Yang to eat. Gu Yundong was speechless. You're torturing my man while showing off your love in front of me. Can we still be father and daughter? I'm angry. I'm not eating anymore. Gu Yundong put down her chopsticks and ran towards the door. Other than the main door in the middle, there was a small door at the side of the Gu family's courtyard. Gu Yundong opened the small door and secretly glanced at Shao Qingyuan. Perhaps sensing her gaze, Shao Qingyuan quickly looked over. When their eyes met, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Then, he moved his lips silently, as if he was saying something. Gu Yundong could vaguely tell that he said that he was fine and asked her to go back quickly. It was just standing for a few hours. It was not a problem for him. Gu Yundong immediately felt very uncomfortable, especially when she saw his lips that were cracked by the sun. Her heart ached constantly. At this moment, there were many people passing by the door. They were mostly working in the Gu family's workshop. The weather was hot now, and the days were long and the nights were short. The working time in the workshop had also been adjusted. At noon, everyone could go back and rest for 2 hours. Therefore, other than those on duty, many people went home to eat after getting food in the workshop. They also rested before coming back to work in the afternoon. Therefore, when these people passed by the Gu family's door, they saw Shao Qingyuan standing there stiffly. Seeing his pursed lips and expressionless face, no one dared to step forward and speak. They only began to discuss softly. Shao Qingyuan pretended not to hear them and stood there like a soldier. In the end, Gu Yundong did not persuade him to leave. Although her heart ached, she knew Gu Dajiang's intentions. If she slapped her father in the face at this time, if Shao Qingyuan dared to bully her in the future, her father would not even have the right to speak up for her. She understood the ways of the world. It was just uncomfortable. Gu Yundong returned to the courtyard listlessly. Aunt Ku, who was sewing, glanced at her. Another 2 hours passed. Gu Yundong could not help but look at Gu Dajiang's room. Gu Dajiang had woken up from his afternoon nap, and the workers from the Gu family workshop had returned. Seeing that Shao Qingyuan was still standing there motionless, the discussion became even louder. Fortunately, a cool breeze soon blew over. Before Gu Yundong could heave a sigh of relief, she heard the unique thunder of summer. Before long, bean-sized raindrops poured down. Accompanied by a rumbling sound, the heat of the entire day was swept away. Gu Yundong frowned. Even Aunt Ku stopped what she was doing. At this moment, Father Tong hurriedly walked through the corridor to Gu Yundong and handed her a small piece of paper. Chapter 567. Shao Qingyuan enters the Gu family. Gu Yundong was stunned. Who sent it? Father Tong pointed in the direction of the Shao family. Mao climbed the ladder and stood on the wall just now. He threw it down in the rain. The note wrapped a stone and was kept in a pouch, so it was thrown under the roof without being drenched by the rain. Gu Yundong frowned and unfolded the note. After reading the words on it, her expression suddenly changed and she stood up. What's wrong? What does it say? Aunt Ku asked. Gu Yundong did not have time to answer her. She hurriedly entered Gu Dajiang house. Gu Dajiang snorted and heard Gu Yundong say, "Father, let Brother Shao in. A Mao just sent me a piece of paper saying that they encountered a wolf when they entered the mountain. Brother Shao was seriously injured in order to save him." Gu Dajiang couldn't maintain the expression on his face. His eyes changed as he suddenly stood up and walked out. As he walked, he said to Shuirong, "Run over first and bring him in. Also, get Tong in to send for a doctor." After Shuirong ran out, he could not help but scold. "He's just trying to be brave." Gu Yundong quickened his pace. When he reached the entrance of the Gu residence, he happened to see Shuirong helping Shao Qingyuan in. His clothes were stained with blood. She was angry and anxious. "Why didn't you say anything when you were injured? Do you want to die?" As she spoke, she went to help him up. Seeing his pale face and weak breathing, she wished she could hit him again. The entire Gu family moved. Madame Cui went to tidy up the room. Her daughter-in-law, Madame Jiang, went to boil water. Tong Shuitao went to the Shao family to get the medicine. She knew that he had it at home. Aunt Ku and Shinsidian had prepared a first aid kit, gauze, and so on. When Shao Qingyuan was placed on the bed, his body was hot, as if he had a high fever. When Gu Yundong placed her hand on his forehead, it was so hot that she almost retracted her hand. She hurriedly asked, "Do you have medicine to reduce your fever at home?" "No, I didn't have time to make it." During this period of time, he had been thinking about other pills. There were all kinds of medicine that could treat internal and external injuries. On the other hand, he didn't have time to think about common medicine like fever. Gu Yundong frowned. She turned around and saw A Mao and the rest coming in. They had brought a lot of herbs, but this medicine needed to be brewed slowly. It was too slow. Gu Yundong thought about it and could not help but take out a fever pill when no one was paying attention. She stuffed it into Shao Qingyuan's mouth and said in a low voice, "Eat this." Shao Qingyuan did not know what it was, but he had always listened to Gu Yundong. He swallowed it without even opening his eyes. Felt a little strange. There was no particularly strong medicinal smell, and it was slightly bitter. After Gu Yundong fed the medicine, she went out with the others. Only then did Tong Ping and Father Tong come over to help Shao Qingyuan take off his wet clothes and wipe his body with hot water. The two of them finally saw how serious the injury on Shao Qingyuan's back was. Not only was he scratched by the wolf claws, but he also seemed to have been cut by sharp objects. The wound was very deep. Originally, it was not a big problem to bandage the injuries with medicine. Unexpectedly, when he came back, it was hot and then raining. His wound, which had originally healed a little, had torn open again. If not for Shao Qingyuan's good physique, he would not have been able to hold on. But Gu Yundong was still very angry. She did not know whom she was angry with. In the end, she could only kick the pillar under the corridor. Gu Dajiang's face was dark. He looked at Gu Yundong guiltily. Chapter 568. Blocking Gu Dajiang, but Gu Yundong had been paying attention to the door and did not receive his gaze. The doctor was quickly brought back. He was from the village, so it was not difficult for him to treat external injuries. Actually, as long as Shao Qingyuan woke up, he could handle it himself. The doctor prescribed medicine for Shao Qingyuan and wrapped the wound before walking out. Gu Yundong hurried forward and asked, "How is he?" "As long as the fever subsides, it'll be fine. It's best not to touch the wound on your back. Avoid touching water. You'll be fine after recuperating for a while." Gu Yundong got someone to send him out and walked into the house in a few steps. Shao Qingyuan was half asleep. When he saw her come in, he even smiled at her. Gu Yundong glared at him angrily. "You deserve it. Who told you not to say anything?" Shao Qingyuan didn't seem to hear her and just looked at her. They had not seen each other for a long time. Initially, he wanted to stand in front of her in clean clothes. He did not expect to be in such a sorry state, which made him feel very regretful. Gu Yundong's heart softened. She walked to the edge of the bed and lowered his voice. "I'll stay here and watch over you. Hurry up and sleep. A Mao told me just now that you didn't sleep well in the mountains. Thankfully, you lasted until now." "Yes?" Shao Qingyuan's throat was dry, and his voice was hoarse. "Your father." My father was also very nervous when he heard that you were injured. He didn't mean to blame you. Only then did Shao Qingyuan feel relieved. He closed his eyes slightly and fell asleep. Gu Dajiang, who was outside the door, wanted Gu Yundong to come out a few times, but he could not speak. He didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. With his observation of Shao Qingyuan and the information he had heard from Yundong, it wouldn't be a problem for him to stand at the door for a day and a night. This person was strong. It was not a problem for him to stand at the door and bask in the sun. However, the outcome was indeed terrible. Gu Dajiang began to feel frustrated. He couldn't stay at home anymore. He turned around and said to Madame Yang, "I'm going out for a walk." Madame Yang nodded and began to look at Shao Qingyuan's room worriedly. Gu Dajiang was speechless. It was simply too vexing. With his hands behind his back, he left the Gu residence alone. When Gu Yunshu turned around, she happened to see his back. She suddenly felt as if his father was very lonely. At this moment, the rain had already stopped. After the summer afternoon was washed by the rain, it was much cooler. Gu Dajiang walked along the village road and saw many people going out after the rain. They gathered together and chatted. As he got closer, he heard the words Gu family and wolf cub. His face instantly darkened. Now, the entire village seemed to know that Shao Qingyuan had fainted after being rejected by him. Why were these people so concerned about other people's family matters? However, Gu Dajiang didn't say anything. Instead, a few villagers who were gossiping immediately stopped when they saw him and quickly dispersed. Everyone did not forget that the women who gossiped about Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan were not having a good time. Especially because of their big mouths, the men in the family could not enter the Gu family's workshop to work. Gu Dajiang pursed his lips and continued walking. He thought that he might as well take a look at the orchard. Unexpectedly, after walking for a while, someone suddenly walked out and stopped him. That person asked him, "Are you Gu Dajiang?" Gu Dajiang narrowed his eyes. This person was very unfamiliar. They shouldn't have met before, right? Someone from the village. Chapter 569. Someone with malicious intentions. Gu Dajiang subconsciously frowned. "I am." The man looked around in a mysterious manner. "Can we talk in private?" It was as if something important had happened. Gu Dajiang sized up the person, who looked to be about the same age as him. He was wearing the clothes of an ordinary villager and was shorter than him. His eyes were slightly evasive. Gu Dajiang sneered in his heart and said directly, "No." The other party was stunned for a moment, as if he did not expect him to reject so bluntly. However, when he looked up and saw the anger and dissatisfaction on his face, he seemed to understand and said, "Brother Gu seems to be very angry. Who's your brother?" The man said again, "Is it because of Shao Qingyuan? I heard that Brother Gu doesn't like Shao Qingyuan." That makes sense. After all, he's a wolf cub that everyone in the village fears. He's fierce and cruel. No one should like him. A wolf cub. Gu Dajiang narrowed his eyes and muttered softly. Seeing that he was interested, the other party immediately said, "Brother Gu, you still don't know? This Shao Qingyuan was picked up by the Li family's old master from a wild wolf in the mountains when he was young. In the past, he even drank the milk of a female wolf, so he has the ferocity of a wolf in his bones. When he was young, it was quite obvious that other children didn't play with him because he was a biter. Once, he bit a child's arm until it bled. That child's parents came to seek justice. It was only when the Li family's old master apologized to the parents that it was over. Tell me, didn't old Master Li treat him well? Old Master Li brought him out of the deep mountains and raised him. He caused trouble and old Master Li helped to clean up the mess. He was infamous. Later on, for him, old Master Li cut ties with the Li family and moved out with him. Old Master Li took good care of him. He couldn't even compare to old Master Li's biological son and grandson. Unexpectedly, when old Master Li was seriously ill, not only did Shao Qingyuan ignore him, but after he died, he even sent old Master Li's corpse back to the Li family. He left without looking back. When he returned, he ate meat and drank wine. Don't you think that's unfilial? Everyone in the village says that he's an ingrate and can't be trusted. So he got the title of a wolf cub. That's not all. He was unfilial to the old man and also attacked the children. As for the Gao family at the entrance of the village, he once threw their children into the river. When they almost died, he fished them out and threw them back down. He scared the children out of their wits. Do you think this method is cruel? Because he's so unscrupulous, everyone in the village is afraid of him. No one dares to speak ill of him, and no one introduces him to girls to avoid harming others. But who would have thought that he would actually target your Gu family's young lady and coax her? It's only been a short while, but he's already engaged. As the man spoke, he shook his head regretfully and sighed. Who would believe that he's not coming for the Gu family's assets? Moreover, I heard that his personality will be passed down to the next generation in the future. Pity your daughter. Why did she take a fancy to him? He shook his head and sympathized with Gu Dajiang. Gu Dajiang's eyes darkened. Just as the other party felt that he was about to go back and fight with Shao Qingyuan, he suddenly heard Gu Dajiang's questioning voice. You mean that my daughter's taste is bad? Chapter 570. He has no right to disdain. That person was slightly stunned. Just as he was about to smile, he froze. He quickly denied it. No, I didn't mean that. Then what do you mean? What I want to say is that Miss Gu is innocent and ignorant of the world. It's because Shao Qingyuan is too cunning. He schemed and racked his brains to use many methods. Miss Gu did not see his true colors and fell into his trap. Of course, I believe that Brother Gu can definitely see through Shao Qingyuan's nature at a glance. Otherwise, you wouldn't have rejected him. Although he said that the other party's gaze was disdainful. What did he mean by seeing through Shao Qingyuan's nature? He simply looked down on the bumpkins in this village. When he heard that young Master Lu had come that day, Gu Dajiang respectfully invited him in. He pulled young Master Lu and chatted for more than 2 hours. In the end, young Master Lu was frightened away by his enthusiasm. In short, Shao Qingyuan is too despicable. He actually deceived Miss Gu. Gu Dajiang stared at that person and said coldly, So you mean that everyone in the village can tell that Shao Qingyuan has a bad character? The other party was stunned. He felt that something was wrong, but he still nodded. Yes. Gu Dajiang suddenly raised his voice. Everyone in the village can tell, but my daughter, who has a workshop and a shop while managing so many people, can't tell. She was even fooled. Are you saying that our Yundong is stupid? No, no, no. I didn't mean that. Wasn't Gu Dajiang's focus wrong? He was clearly talking about Shao Qingyuan. Why did this guy have to involve his daughter? That's what you mean. You still want to deny it. I was wondering why you came to me and said something. Turns out that you're scolding me indirectly. You actually dare to provoke me in front of me. The other party was speechless. No. How did you understand this is provocation? Seeing Gu Dajiang approach him menacingly, the other party finally couldn't take it anymore. He suddenly turned his head. Is there something wrong with you? With that, he quickly ran away. Gu Dajiang was abnormal. No wonder his daughter liked Shao Qingyuan. Had the father and daughter both gone crazy? Could it be that, after living with Madame Yang for too long, her family's brains had gone bad? Gu Dajiang stood on the spot and watched as he ran away. After a while, he snorted coldly. How dare you sow discord in front of me? Who do you think you are? No matter how bad Shao Qingyuan was, he was still his daughter's man. Gu Dajiang could despise him, his wife could despise him, and his daughter could despise him. However, what right did such an unrelated person have to say anything? Our Yundong has good taste. Gu Dajiang sneered and turned to leave. However, this person's words dispelled a lot of the anger in Gu Dajiang's heart. He did not go to the orchard again and returned to the Gu family. As soon as he entered the Gu residence, he smelled the strong smell of Chinese herbs, which made Gu Dajiang sneeze violently. He sniffled and was about to go to Shao Qingyuan's guest room to take a look when he saw a young man rushing over. Gu Dajiang remembered that Yundong had called him A Mao previously. He seemed to be Shao Qingyuan's man. A Mao stood in front of him with a wooden box in its left hand and 2 pheasants in its right. Chapter 571. He knows the reason. Gu Dajiang looked at him in confusion and heard A Mao say, Uncle Gu, this is from our young master. For me. Yes, young master prepared them before coming to the Gu residence. Mao said, "These 2 pheasants were just caught before we went down the mountain. They can be cooked tonight. As for what's in this wooden box, I don't know." Previously, when Shao Qingyuan was rejected, he had these things in his hands. However, when Mao came to persuade him, Shao Qingyuan handed them to Mao to prevent them from getting wet, especially the wooden box. It looked like something very important. Mao had been holding it in his hand. He only handed it to Gu Dajiang personally when he saw him. Gu Dajiang took the box and got Mao to carry the pheasants to the kitchen. It was such a hot day. The pheasants would go bad very soon. Then he carried the box into the central room. After sitting down, he placed the box on the table, but he did not open it for a long time. It was only when Shuirong came in and said that Shao Qingyuan's temperature was no longer that high that he nodded slightly. After a while, he still reached out to the box, pulled open the lock in front, and opened the lid. With just one look, Gu Dajiang's hand froze. There were not many things in the box, but the weight was not light. There were a few banknotes at the top. To the old Gu Dajiang, this was really a huge sum. Below the banknotes was some deeds to a house and a shop. The house was the green brick tile house in Yongfu village. The shop was a medicine shop in Fengkai County. And at the bottom there was actually another one. This was... Gu Dajiang looked at the date in surprise. It was indeed the manor which had been bought recently. It should have been bought by Shao Qingyuan 2 days before he entered the mountains. The manor was not big, but it was located near the prefectural city. No wonder there were not many banknotes left in this box. Turned out that they were all used here. These were all Shao Qingyuan's belongings? He gave them all to Yundong? Gu Dajiang's emotions were especially complicated. Seeing that he was silent, Shuirong, who was standing behind him, paused and asked in a low voice, "Master, are you dissatisfied with young Master Shao?" Sigh. Gu Dajiang shook his head. "It's because I'm satisfied that I'm worried." Shuirong was puzzled. Gu Dajiang said, "How old do you think our Yundong is? Why is he obsessed with her? The problem is that I can't find an excuse to break them up and let Yundong stay single for a few more years." Shuirong was speechless. He was not a father yet. He could not understand that. He was still at the stage where he wanted to steal other people's cabbages. Hence, Shuirong did not know what to say. However, when he saw his master sitting there motionless, he could not help but persuade him. "Actually, master, why don't you think in another direction? Young Master Shao has no parents. If Miss marries him, she can be the head of the family and don't have to serve her in-laws. Moreover, young Master Shao's family is in Yongfu village. His house is next door. It's only 2 steps away. Usually, he can come to the Gu family directly for food or anything. We can know if Miss has suffered or not even if she doesn't go out. This way, it's better than marrying into a rich family." Of course, Gu Dajiang knew these principles. It was because he knew that he didn't object strongly. Exhaling, Gu Dajiang closed the wooden box on the table and stood up to walk out. "I'll go and see if he's awake." He went straight to Shao Qingyuan's room. Just as he reached the door, he heard his son's voice. Chapter 572. Gu Yunshu worries about his wife, eldest sister. "Are you angry with father?" Gu Yunshu said uneasily. "Father came back just now. I saw him enter the house alone. He's so pitiful." He instantly felt that he had a huge responsibility. His father and eldest sister had a feud. As the eldest son in the family, he had the obligation to enlighten them so that the family could be harmonious and happy. Yes, Gu Yunshu, work hard. Gu Yundong was sitting in front of Shao Qingyuan's bed. When she saw that his fever had subsided, she heaved a sigh of relief. She did not expect to hear her brother's worried words. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What are you thinking? Your head isn't big, but you're thinking too much. Why is eldest sister angry with father? Father didn't deliberately let brother Shao expose himself to the sun knowing that he was injured. This is an accident." Gu Yunshu nodded, not fully understanding. "Is that so? Yes, you'll know when you become a father. Then I'll get engaged and married as soon as possible. That way I can become a father sooner." Gu Yundong was speechless. No, that was not what she meant. Dajiang couldn't stand it anymore. He frowned and entered. What nonsense are you talking about? You're still so young, and you're already thinking about getting a wife. This daughter had just gotten engaged, and his son was actually thinking of starting a family? Yunshu was unconvinced. Father, I have a classmate who is only a year older than me. He is already engaged. He has a wife as soon as he is born. Why can't I be engaged at my age? If father had chosen a wife for me when I was born, I wouldn't have to worry so much now. Yundong turned her head. She wanted to laugh, but she had to hold it in. She stood up and called out, Father! Dajiang nodded and decided not to talk to his annoying son. He handed over the box in his hand. Qingyuan gave this to you. Keep it well and don't return it to him. Yundong raised her eyebrows in surprise. She opened the box and took a look. Then she laughed. This was the second time she had received such a box. Every time, Qingyuan would put all his money into it. Was this person really counting on her to give him some living expenses? She couldn't help but turn her head and look at the man lying on the bed. Unexpectedly, she met his dark eyes. Dajiang also realized that he was awake. He asked stiffly, Are you feeling better? Qingyuan moved slightly and wanted to sit up. However, Dajiang rushed forward and reached out to stop him. He frowned and said, Lie down. Don't move around. Otherwise the wound will open. Qingyuan could only lie down again. He looked at Dajiang and said, Uncle Gu, I'm sorry. Humph. Dajiang snorted. There won't be a next time. Don't try to trick me. No. Qingyuan had never thought of using such a method to soften Dajiang's heart. Coincidentally, he was injured deep in the mountains. As soon as he returned, he heard that Dajiang was looking for him. He naturally had to visit him immediately, and he stood outside sincerely and willingly. If he had said in advance that he was injured and could not stand for long, then anyone who heard him would think that he was looking for an excuse, not to mention Uncle Gu. He would show weakness and be irresponsible. Even if it was the truth, it would leave a bad impression. Dajiang knew this too. He just felt vexed, especially when he saw his daughter standing by the bed looking very concerned about Qingyuan. Therefore, Dajiang told him to rest well and planned to leave. However, before he left, he suddenly paused and frowned. When I went out just now, I met someone. Chapter 573. His hatred. The few people in the room looked up at him at the same time. Dajiang said, That person told me something about you. Qingyuan was stunned. As if he had thought of something, his expression changed slightly and he asked in a hoarse voice, What did he say? He said that you were an ingrate and had once been adopted by the Li family. The Li family's old master treated you too well. He even fell out with his biological children for you and moved out to live with you. In the end, when he was seriously ill, you didn't care about him and even transported his corpse back to the Li family. After Dajiang finished speaking, he saw Qingyuan suddenly clench his fingers. The veins on the back of his hand bulged, and his lips were tightly pursed. The coldness in his eyes almost materialized. How much hatred did he have for the Li family? Qingyuan asked word by word. What else did he say? He said that your methods are cruel and that you're cold and heartless. You'll pass it on to the children in the future. Before Dajiang could finish speaking, Qingyuan had already sat up. He pulled off the blanket covering him and was about to get off the ground. Yundong was faster and stopped him. What are you doing? You can't go anywhere now. Rest well. Qingyuan's movements affected his wound, and the pain from his body woke him up a little. Coupled with the fact that his fever had just subsided and his entire body was sore, he sat back on the bed with Yundong's help. However, as if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked up and grabbed Yundong's hand tightly. No, that man wasn't telling the truth. I know. I've known you for a long time and understand you better than anyone else. I believe you. Yundong felt his hand tremble slightly and her heart tightened. She held his hand firmly. Qingyuan heaved a sigh of relief, but he quickly looked up at Dajiang. Without waiting for Dajiang to speak, Gu Yundong spoke first. Don't worry, my father won't believe it either. That person clearly has ill intentions and doesn't want us to have an easy time. Right, father? Gu Dajiang nodded. I'm not that biased. I know that person is here to sow discord. However, to his surprise, Shao Qingyuan's reaction was so big. However, he paused for a moment and continued. Since you're going to marry Yundong in the future, it's better to make some things clear. Supposedly, when two people get married, they have to understand each other's families. You possibly know everything about the Gu family, but Yundong doesn't even know why you're called a wolf cub, right? New Jersey 11 Gu Dajiang waved his hand. There's no need to be in a hurry to say it now. You're still injured. Think carefully. It's not too late to say later. With that, he left with a worried Gu Yunshu. Only when the two of them had completely disappeared did Shao Qingyuan retract his gaze and look at Gu Yundong. The two of them were still holding hands. Gu Yundong wanted to see if the wound on his back had split open. She pulled her hand out twice but did not succeed. In the end, she said helplessly, "Can I get Tong Ping to come in and help you take a look?" Shao Qingyuan still didn't move. He stared at her quietly for a long time before asking softly, "Aren't you going to ask?" Gu Yundong sat down and thought about it in silence. After a while, she said, "I did want to ask you, but you seem to be against mentioning this matter. I just know that perhaps this matter is very painful and heavy for you. I don't know what the Li family has done to you. I only know that I want you to slowly forget those bad things. One day, when you can talk about these things calmly, I will know." Shao Qingyuan's eyes gradually became fiery as he looked at her. His breathing also became slightly hurried. The way he looked at Gu Yundong was so hot that it seemed to be able to burn everything. Chapter 574. Shao Qingyuan's background. Gu Yundong looked at him and could not help but pinch his hand. "Don't think too much. What you need now is to recuperate. Nothing else is important. Also, it's all right with my father. Other than overly loving his daughter, he's actually very reasonable." She went out to call Tong Ping. Tong Ping came in and changed his dressing. Sure enough, the wound had opened up a little. Fortunately, it was not very serious. Gu Yundong fed him medicine. Seeing that he had closed his eyes and fallen asleep again, she quietly left the room. However, as soon as she left, Shao Qingyuan opened his eyes and looked at the beam above his head. No one knew what he was thinking. The Gu family's house was very peaceful this night. Gu Yundong knew that her father had accepted Shao Qingyuan. She felt relieved and slept peacefully. However, she did care about Shao Qingyuan's injuries, so when she woke up early in the morning, she quickly ran to his room. Shao Qingyuan had already sat up. Tong Ping had come over to change his dressing at dawn. He had just finished his porridge. Gu Yundong stepped forward and placed a hand on his forehead. Good, he did not have a recurring fever, and he was in much better spirits than yesterday. His recovery ability was indeed very powerful. From the moment she entered, Shao Qingyuan's gaze had been on her. His eyes were so gentle that they were almost watery. Gu Yundong slowly felt uncomfortable under his gaze and could not help but glare at him. "If you keep staring at me, when my father comes later, you'll be chased home. Do you believe me? Yundong doesn't want me to go back?" Shao Qingyuan said and reached out to hold her hand. His hand was warm and the weather was still a little cool early in the morning. Gu Yundong's small hand was cold. When he held it, he instantly felt a burning heat surge to his heart. Gu Yundong was speechless. Shao Qingyuan was extremely satisfied. After holding her hand long enough, he finally let go of her. "Go and call Uncle Gu. There are some things that shouldn't be hidden anymore." Gu Yundong was stunned. "You?" Shao Qingyuan took a deep breath. "I'm very calm now. With you around, those things can't hurt me anymore." After a pause, he opened his mouth again and asked nervously, "Is it true that no matter what I say, you won't leave me?" Gu Yundong did not know what kind of battle he had gone through that night. She only knew that at this moment, Shao Qingyuan had an unprecedented vulnerability and urgently needed her affirmation. Hence, she took his hand again and interlocked her fingers with his. She nodded and said, "As long as you haven't done anything to let me down, I won't leave you even if you're a monster." Strictly speaking, Gu Yundong's background was a little mysterious. Shao Qingyuan seemed to relax and looked down at their intertwined hands. One was tanned and the other was fair. One was rough and the other delicate. It was as if there was a thread tightly wrapped between the two hands. It was magically reassuring. Okay. His voice was very low. Gu Yundong almost did not hear him clearly. Go and summon Uncle Gu. Gu Yundong left. After a while, Gu Dajiang entered. He did not bring anyone but himself and Gu Yundong. After entering the room, he closed the door. Shao Qingyuan was leaning against a blanket. After seeing the two of them sit down, he slowly spoke. Old Master Li said that he carried me out of the mountains. Actually, that's not the case. Chapter 575. He has grandpa. When Shao Qingyuan was brought back to the Li family, he was not even a year old and did not know how to walk. How was he brought home? He was too young at that time and had no impression of it. From the moment he could remember, it was his life in the Li family after he was 3 or 4 years old. Old Master Li brought him back. The Li family's eldest son only had 2 daughters at that time, so Old Master Li put Shao Qingyuan under their name. However, the Li family's eldest son and his wife did not like this child who had suddenly appeared. It was as if they could no longer give birth to a son, making the entire village laugh. Moreover, Mrs. Li, or Madame Bao, was already pregnant at that time. She felt that this was definitely a son. Unexpectedly, it was another daughter. It was Li Chuanxiang, who had come to the Gu family's workshop to look for a job. She was only a year younger than Shao Qingyuan. When Madame Bao heard that it was a daughter again, there was no telling if it was because she was afraid of being criticized or something, but she pushed all the blame to Shao Qingyuan and said that he was a jinx. He was the one who caused her to lose her son. Shao Qingyuan's life in the Li family had become exceptionally difficult. Even though he was still young at that time, he often starved and froze. He was 2 or 3 years old, but he was still so skinny that he could not even walk steadily. At that time, Qingyuan could already vaguely remember things and understood that he was not a child of the Li family. Although he was a little disappointed, he still felt that it was already very lucky for him to have a place to stay. Besides, he had his grandfather. When he was beaten, Grandpa would take the ointment and comfort him while applying it. After he was scolded, Grandpa would also scold and blame his foster parents. When he was hungry, Grandpa would secretly feed him half of the sweet potatoes he had kept. If he was cold, Grandpa would modify his old clothes for him to wear. Therefore, it didn't matter. Compared to many homeless children, Qingyuan felt very happy. He was very satisfied. He worked especially hard. His small figure often carried a wooden bucket that was taller than him to feed the pigs. He carried a huge basket to hunt for pig grass. When he returned home, he would always have injuries all over his body due to the bumps. When faced with his grandfather's pained gaze, he would always comfort him sensibly. It's not hard on me. However, when little Qingyuan was 5 years old, Madame Bao was pregnant again. She already had 3 daughters in the past. This time, she had to get a boy in one fell swoop. She was so excited that she could not care less about finding trouble with little Qingyuan, even though her 3 daughters would occasionally order this adopted son around. However, a few days before she was about to give birth, Madame Bao suddenly had a nightmare. In her dream, someone told her that there was a jinx blocking her way at home. He was selfish and domineering and did not allow other boys to share her love. Therefore, it would be difficult for Madame Bao to give birth to a son. When Madame Bao woke up, her face was pale. She immediately thought of little Qingyuan and immediately shook her husband awake. The two of them hated Shao Qingyuan to death. The next morning, Father Li quietly knocked him out and carried him into the mountains. Go back to where you came from. This is your own life. He directly left him at the 9 Tigers Mountain. When little Qingyuan woke up, he was faced with a black monkey covered in fur. It stared at him with its round eyes. He was terrified and turned to run. However, he was young and in the mountains. He only ran a few steps before he slid down the hill. However, before he could care about the pain, he was carried away by the monkey that was even taller than him. Chapter 576. The second time one could imagine how a child who was only so young lived in the mountains. The monkey treated him like a toy. It would carry him up the tree at any time and throw him to play with other monkeys. There were a few times when he was almost thrown to the ground. Little Qingyuan was so frightened that he cried. However, he did not know why he was here. He also did not know the way home. He missed his grandfather. He didn't want to be with these monkeys. He felt like he was going to die. He was thirsty, tired, and hungry. But no matter how much he cried for help, no one came to his rescue. Later on, he realized that these monkeys seemed to know how to imitate his movements. Therefore, he tried his best to squeeze out a smile. His face was clearly covered in injuries and he did not have any strength, but he still tried his best to pretend to be very happy and play with them, fighting with them. Perhaps because he was slowly getting familiar with them, the monkeys stopped playing with him and let down their guard. They no longer guarded him at all times. Therefore, when he encountered a few yellow-throated martens one day, those monkeys ran away in a hurry before they could bring him along. Little Qingyuan also fell into a bush while running, but he avoided the yellow-throated martens. But he had also become alone. Little Qingyuan did not know what to do and could only find a direction to walk in. It was not that he had not encountered other animals on the way. He was also afraid, but when he followed the monkeys previously, he had learned a little instinct to avoid danger. When he was hungry, he would pick those very low-growing fruits to eat. He didn't even know if they were poisonous, but if he didn't eat, he wouldn't have the strength. He wanted to go back and find his grandfather. He didn't want to die here. Fortunately, he was still in the periphery of the Nine Tigers Mountain and had not encountered any ferocious beasts. After walking aimlessly for 3 days, when he was avoiding a wild boar, he fell into a hunter's trap and fainted. When he woke up again, he was in a hunter's house. The hunter thought that he would die. After figuring where his house was, the man sent him back to Yongfu village. At that time, 10 days had passed since he was sent to the mountains. Madame Bao gave birth to a boy. Little Qingyuan did not know that he had been sent away by his adoptive parents. He only knew that he was very happy to see his grandfather again. Grandpa was also happy. He hugged him and cried until he almost fainted. He kept smiling and comforted his grandfather that he was fine and not sick. He even met such a cute monkey and ate many fruits that he had never eaten before. He experienced many interesting things. However, his grandfather seemed to be crying even harder. He kept saying that it was his fault and that he had let him down. Little Qingyuan was at a loss and did not understand what he meant. Later, when no one was around, his adoptive father warned him not to tell anyone about what had happened in the mountains. If anyone asked, they would say that he was out visiting someone else. Little Qingyuan did not understand why, but he was actually very afraid of recalling the miserable days in the mountains, so he agreed and did not tell anyone. However, Madame Bao felt that her dream had come true. Shao Qingyuan was indeed a jinx. Otherwise, why would she really give birth to a son after she sent him away? They didn't want to keep Shao Qingyuan at all, but Old Master Li scolded them and warned them that he would cut ties with them if they dared to do such a thing again. The Li family's parents could only keep him, but little Qingyuan's life was even worse. At the age of 8, Madame Bao became pregnant again. With her previous experience, Madame Bao was very afraid of little Qingyuan. However, this time it was obvious that she could no longer throw him into the mountains. Chapter 577. Leaving the Li family, Madame Bao and Father Li discussed. The two of them were even more ruthless this time. They got the news from somewhere and contacted a gangster in the county. It was said that a group of human traffickers had been wandering around the city during that period of time and had specially targeted those good-looking little boys. Little Qingyuan was good-looking. At that time, even though he was sallow and thin, his facial features were still very outstanding. This was also the reason why the children of Madame Bao hated him. Madame Bao and the gangster had agreed that she would not take a single cent, as long as the gangster took Shao Qingyuan far away, so that he would never appear in front of them again. Qingyuan was indeed taken away. This time he knew what was going on. He could clearly feel the malice of his adoptive parents, who wanted him dead. Actually, he had no feelings for them. He just couldn't bear to part with his grandfather. If his grandfather knew that something had happened to him, he wouldn't know how sad his grandfather would be. Moreover, these human traffickers were ruthless. He had eavesdropped on what they wanted to do by abducting these children. When one of the kids wanted to escape, his leg was even broken. Little Qingyuan knew that he had to escape. Coincidentally, there was a child who was captured with them. The two of them seemed to know what the other party meant from each other's eyes. While no one was paying attention, the two of them talked and set fire when the human traffickers let down their guard. At that time, they had actually already been brought to Qingyuan Prefecture. To little Qingyuan, who was going on a long trip for the first time, it was already 1,000,000 miles away from Yongfu village. Therefore, after escaping, he was brought to the government office. When the officials said that they wanted to send him back and asked for his home address, little Qingyuan hesitated for a long time. He thought that since his adoptive parents did not want him, he might as well not go back. He was already 8 years old and could support himself. But what about Grandpa? Knowing that he was missing, Grandpa must be very anxious. He might be looking for him everywhere. Little Qingyuan thought about it and decided to go back first. He would let his grandfather know that he was fine. Then, he would talk to his grandfather and leave the Li family. When he returned to the Li family, he saw old Master Li, who had broken his leg looking for him. Qingyuan immediately blamed himself, especially when he thought about how he had considered whether he should come back or not. He felt that he was too unfilial. Grandpa Li was very happy to see him and kept comforting him. Grandpa is fine. As long as you're safe and sound, it doesn't matter even if both of my legs are broken. The Li family's parents' faces were very ugly. Moreover, because Madame Bao had given birth to another son, they firmly believed in the idea of little Qingyuan jinxing their family. In the end, little Qingyuan did not leave. He had to take care of his grandfather. Grandpa didn't agree to let him go either. He even begged him not to say anything about being trafficked. Otherwise, if what his adoptive parents had done was exposed, the Li family would be destroyed. Not only did the Li family have the first branch, but they also had the second branch, Grandpa and other innocent people. Grandpa was about to kneel down in front of him. How could little Qingyuan not agree? However, ever since then, little Qingyuan had been guarding against the Li family's parents. Fortunately, he had grown up and slowly understood many things. When he was 13 years old, Madame Bao was pregnant again. Shao Qingyuan knew that the Li family's parents would not let him off this time. He left the Li family without hesitation. Seeing that his attitude was firm, his grandfather finally stopped persuading him and even left home with him. The grandfather and grandson lived together. This action embarrassed the Li family and made them the laughingstock of the entire village. Chapter 578. Stunned sleep talk. The Li family's parents didn't agree at first and even set very harsh conditions. One of them was that they didn't allow Shao Qingyuan to buy or sell farmland in Fengkai County. Shao Qingyuan agreed without hesitation. He had strength and could hunt. In the past few years, he had entered and left the mountains several times. He had even fought with a lone wolf. He had no problem supporting himself and his grandfather. Chun Liang gave Shao Qingyuan and his granddaughter a house at the foot of the mountain. This house was very dilapidated, but they still had to buy it. The two of them were penniless. Where did they get the money? It was only after Shao Qingyuan went up the mountain and caught a wild boar to sell that they finally had a place to live. Although the house was dilapidated and there were few people, it didn't matter. He was full of confidence in his future life. This time, Madame Bao gave birth to another daughter. Madame Bao hated him to death. She felt that it was because Shao Qingyuan was still in the village. He was restraining her. The couple came to the door and hit and scolded Shao Qingyuan. Shao Qingyuan was no longer at the age where they could hit him freely. He would retaliate and push Father Li to the ground on the spot. Father Li was down for a long time and could not get up. Madame Bao scolded him for being unfilial and an ingrate. For the sake of his grandfather, Shao Qingyuan didn't react to the scolding. However, after that day, there were rumors in the village that Shao Qingyuan was a wolf cub. It was said that he had been dirty since he was young. Not only did he steal things, but he also hit his younger siblings. The Li couple portrayed themselves as aggrieved and bullied. When Grandpa Li heard this, he sighed at home and often wiped his tears. "It's my fault. I didn't teach them well and let Qingyuan suffer." Shao Qingyuan didn't feel aggrieved. He was living a very happy life now. Without the Li family's parents' indirect scolding and his siblings' bullying, it was enough for him and his grandfather to be the only ones in the entire family. However, not long after, Grandpa Li fell ill. Shao Qingyuan knew that he was heartbroken. He felt that he was very incompetent to let his children and adoptive grandson fight like fire and water. He blamed himself for being a failure in this life. He had a heartache and caught a cold by chance. Moreover, he was old and fell down immediately. Shao Qingyuan saw that he often talked in his dreams, saying that he did not have much time left, but he could not see his family in harmony. He would probably die with regrets. Shao Qingyuan felt very uncomfortable. Just as he was considering whether to ease his relationship with the Li family's parents and move back to the Li family so that his grandfather could feel better, he realized that his grandfather's condition had suddenly worsened and the man's mind was starting to blur. Occasionally, he would even curse himself to the point where he could not even hold the medicine bowl. Shao Qingyuan was very anxious and went to the county city to invite a doctor over. The doctor said that he was poisoned. As for what poison it was, he could not find out. He was afraid that he would have to go to the prefectural city to get a doctor. He could not treat it. Shao Qingyuan was very afraid that his grandfather would die just like that. He had just had the ability to let his grandfather live a good life. How could he accept him leaving? He planned to bring his grandfather to the prefectural city the next day and find the best doctor. He had to treat his grandfather's illness. Shao Qingyuan had even prepared a carriage, but when he went to cover his grandfather with a blanket that night, he heard something that stunned him. Shao Qingyuan, why weren't you the one poisoned? It should have been you. Why didn't you drink that cup of tea? Shao Qingyuan was stunned. He accidentally knocked over a bowl beside him. Grandpa Li was woken up. He didn't know if he was still dreaming or if his reaction was slow after being poisoned, but when he heard Shao Qingyuan's unbelievable question, he blurted out some words. Chapter 579. Cruel truth. Shao Qingyuan would never forget how his grandfather had looked at him with a ferocious and vicious smile back then. His face had been twisted. Yes, I administered the poison, but I was going to give it to you. Why didn't you drink it? Why? Shao Qingyuan thought about it and remembered that his grandfather had indeed poured him a glass of water that day, saying that he had worked hard and that his grandfather could not help. Being sick at most, his grandfather could only pour him a glass of water. Shao Qingyuan was about to drink when Li Chuanxiang came to find trouble and pushed Grandpa Li down. Shao Qingyuan quickly helped Grandpa Li into the house to rest. When he came out again, Li Chuanxiang had already run away in fear. As for the glass of water on the table after the commotion just now, it had all spilled out. More than half of it had spilled on the plate of cut peaches on the table. Shao Qingyuan had specially bought the peaches for his grandfather. Li Chuanxiang had even taken half of them just now. Shao Qingyuan gave the remaining half of the peaches to his grandfather. Anyway, the glass of water was clean, so there was no need to wash the peaches again. Neither of them expected that the peaches had already been poisoned. It was unknown where Grandpa Li found this poison. After taking this poison, one's reaction would be slow and their limbs would be stiff, as if they had a stroke. Shao Qingyuan froze. He didn't understand why his grandfather would give him such poison. Grandpa Li was already awake at this moment. After knowing that he had said something he shouldn't have said in his dream, he didn't panic. Instead, he quickly calmed down. There was no longer any love in his eyes when he looked at Shao Qingyuan, only coldness and disgust. Then, Shao Qingyuan heard the truth from him. Why did I feed you poison? Of course, it's to make you wish you were dead. Grandpa Li smiled as he spoke. I didn't pick you up from the mountains at all. Your father and grandmother personally handed you to me. He looked at Shao Qingyuan's stunned expression, and his eyes were filled with joy. When you were born, your mother died, and she died especially tragically. When you were a month old, your biological brother fell ill. 2 months later, your father's business suffered a huge blow. Your grandmother found an expert to read your fortune and found out that you had a tough life. If you continue to stay at home, your family will be wiped out and you won't have any descendants. Shao Qingyuan's face turned pale, but he listened without moving. The expert said that if they wanted to change your family's fate, they could only send you away. Not only must they send you away, but they also had to suppress your fate. The more miserable you are, the better. Only then will your family become richer and richer. In the future, they will have many children and grandchildren, and the family will prosper. Therefore, your father personally handed you to me and instructed me to watch over you. I can't let you die, nor can I let you have a promising future. You can't have friends, leave your hometown, and must be trapped in this small Yongfu village. It's best to be depressed for the rest of your life. Ha ha ha, look, you're so pitiful. Your life is a joke. No one cares about you. Shao Qingyuan only felt depressed and his vision darkened. After a long time, he said with difficulty, "Then you were so nice to me. In order to make sure that you can't leave the Li family and Yongfu village, do you know what's the most important thing to restrain a person? Of course, it's to hold his feelings and make him unable to let go. I'm very successful, right?" Shao Qingyuan looked at the person in front of him. The person was so unfamiliar that he didn't seem to recognize him. Chapter 580. Looking for biological parents, Shao Qingyuan recalled many things that he had never thought about before. For example, when he arrived at the Li family, although Madame Bao had 2 daughters, she was pregnant with another child. No one knew if it was a boy or a girl. The Li family also had a second and third branch. Why did Grandpa insist on raising him under the door of the vicious eldest son's family? For example, every time he was beaten and scolded, Grandpa would stand in the courtyard and scold the couple. Not only did the second and third branches watch the commotion, but even the neighbors outside saw it as a joke. Therefore, after that, the first branch beat and insulted him even more badly. For example, if there was anything good, his grandfather would never let him eat it in private. He would always take it out openly in front of the other children in the family. Therefore, he became the enemy of all the Li family children. For example, even though his grandfather knew that his adoptive parents did not treat him well, he still used all kinds of excuses to make him stay. So, this was the case. At that moment, Shao Qingyuan's heart sank, and the surrounding colors seemed to dim. He heard his drifting voice say, "If that's the case, why are you telling me now?" Ha 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 ha. Old Master Li laughed wildly. He looked at Shao Qingyuan with pity and joy. Because I'm going to die. He knew that he wouldn't be able to live. Before he died, that would be the time for him to truly destroy Shao Qingyuan. He gave him the most fatal blow. What was physical harm? How pitiful would it be when he realized that the only person he trusted in his life, the one he could rely on and hold on to, had never treated him as a human. Therefore, the love was fake. All the care was a lie. It was just to drag him down to a deeper hell. His life had always been colorless. What he thought to be love feelings was an act that others put on for him to see. He had always been alone. Shao Qingyuan didn't know how he left home. He went to return the carriage and used the money he planned to treat his grandfather with to go to a restaurant for a meal. He went deep into the mountains and killed 2 wild boars. He lay on the hot ground and looked at the sky. When he came back, his grandfather was dead. Shao Qingyuan dragged him to the Li family and didn't care about him anymore. Everyone was scolding him, saying that he was an ingrate who couldn't be talked sense into. They said that the old man had given him all his feelings when he was alive, but he didn't even send him off. Shao Qingyuan didn't explain anything. He locked the door and left the village. He only returned half a year later. The Li family had raided the house. He went to the Li family and smashed all the pots and pans they had taken from him. He tore down the Li family's courtyard door and beat Father Li up. From then on, the people of Yongfu village avoided him like snakes and scorpions. They hated him for being ruthless and no one interacted with him anymore, except for the Zhang family who lived next door. This was how he had lived for the past 5 years. Until he met Yundong. After saying what had happened over the years, Shao Qingyuan went from uneasiness to calmness. It was as if the harm was no longer important. But he still looked at Yundong nervously. At this moment, Yundong only felt a ball of fire burning crazily in his heart. It was so hot that she could only suppress it desperately to retain a trace of rationality. She wanted to kill everyone in the Li family. What right did they have to bully Shao Qingyuan? She wanted to dig out that disgusting old man from the Li family's grave and whip his corpse. Such a beast should not have died so easily. She wanted to. Her hand was squeezed. Gu Yundong's eyes were slightly red and her voice was a little hoarse. I'm here. Are you afraid? He asked cautiously. Gu Yundong did not react for a moment. On the other hand, Gu Dajiang, who was sitting not far away, slapped the table and cursed. What's there to be afraid of? What jinx? It's all nonsense. Death is just eternal sleep. Your biological father and grandmother actually let a smelly old man torture you for the rest of your life. They're cold-blooded and incompetent. What a bunch of crap. Shao Qingyuan was stunned and looked at Gu Dajiang in surprise. After venting his anger, Gu Dajiang met his gaze and immediately felt a little embarrassed. He quickly changed the topic. Then have you looked for your biological parents? Perhaps that old man lied to you? Shao Qingyuan's voice was much calmer this time. I've looked for them. He didn't lie to me. Chapter 581. His biological parents looked for them? Gu Yundong frowned. Looking at his cold expression, a thought suddenly flashed across her mind. A moment later, she suddenly froze and looked at Shao Qingyuan. Are you talking about? She paused and lowered her voice. The Tao family? Shao Qingyuan nodded. Yes, it's the Tao family, a big brewer in Fengkai County. Gu Yundong recalled the disgusted expression he had when they first met Master Tao in the restaurant and the cold expression he had when he met Tao Feng at the bodyguard agency. At that time, she found it strange. Shao Qingyuan should not have any interaction with the Tao family at all. The Tao family did not seem to know him. Why did his emotions change when he saw the Tao family? So that was how it was. It was because he was a member of the Tao family. Shao Qingyuan said, I went to ask an old man from the Tao family in the past. 20 years ago, the Tao family did have a child. When he was born, Mrs. Tao died in childbirth. The eldest young master of the Tao family, Tao Feng, later fell seriously ill. Then, there was a huge problem with the Tao family's business. Not long after, the third young master of the Tao family died. At that time, the Tao family already had 2 young masters. Tao Feng was the eldest young master and was born by Mrs. Tao. The one who made the bet with Lu Wei was the second young master, by the name of Tao Xing. He was the son of a concubine and was deeply loved by Master Tao. After Mrs. Tao passed away, this concubine was made a wife in a few years. The people of the Tao family all feel that it's a pity. Few people know what this premature death is about. I found the old man who served old Madame Tao and asked him. Back then, that child was handed over to a stableman of the Tao family. As for the Li family's old man, he had been a stableman in the Tao mansion for 2 years. Lady Tao, who had died in childbirth, was surnamed Shao. When the Tao family's business was in trouble, there was indeed an expert who came to investigate the feng shui of the Tao family. In the past 10 years, old Master Li had visited the Tao family twice. Gu Yundong fell silent when she heard that, but she thought fiercely in her heart. When the Lu family and the Tao family made a bet, she was simply too benevolent to the Tao family. She should have been heavy-handed at that time. What kind of people were they? They listened to a so-called expert and sent their own flesh and blood away to a stableman. Moreover, they wanted someone to torture him for the rest of his life. They were simply beasts. They were inhuman and unbearable as parents. She was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She recalled the first time she saw Shao Qingyuan. No wonder his eyes were indifferent back then, as if he didn't care about anything. Shao Qingyuan seemed to sense her emotional fluctuations. He squeezed her hand slightly and said, I'm fine now. With Yundong, those hardships were nothing. Gu Yundong's heart tightened. I'll avenge you later. By the way, who was the one who came to father and spouted nonsense to sow discord? She suddenly looked at Gu Dajiang. Gu Dajiang was vexed by the scene of the 2 of them holding hands. When he heard her question, he frowned slightly. Shao Qingyuan didn't think too much about it. It should be eldest Li. He had warned them in the past. The Li family was afraid of his reckless appearance. Therefore, although they would gossip outside for the past few years, they did not dare to really come to him. Everyone lived in peace for a few years. Now that they saw that he was leading a good life and that he was rich and was about to get married and have children, They couldn't stand it anymore and started to ruin it. They probably heard that Dajiang was making things difficult for him and felt that they finally had a chance to trip him up. Chapter 582. Become hardworking. Shao Qingyuan narrowed his eyes slightly and squeezed her hand. I'll handle this. Yundong pursed her lips but did not retort, although she really wanted to vent her anger for him personally. However, it was obvious that regarding this matter, Shao Qingyuan could intimidate the Li family even more badly, lest there was a next time. All right, then let them be on tenterhooks for a few more days. After hearing Shao Qingyuan's background, Dajiang sighed in his heart. He stood up. Rest well. We'll talk about other things after you recover. As he spoke, he stood up and walked out. Forget it. Forget it. Since they were already engaged, he would let the young ones talk alone. He left the room with mixed feelings and returned to his room. Rong followed closely behind and saw his master sitting in front of the desk with a frown. After a long time, Dajiang said to him, Rong, help me bring Tong'an over. Yes, my lord. Not long after, Tong'an came in. He looked like he had just returned from the workshop. There seemed to be a sweet smell on his body. Seeing this, Dajiang pushed a cup of tea over. Seeing that he had drunk it, he asked, Tong'an, do you know the Tao family in the county city? Master, are you referring to the Tao family? Who is in the wine business? Yes. Tell me about the Tao family. Tong'an was a little puzzled. Why did the old master want to learn about the Tao family? However, he did not ask anything and dutifully told his old master what he knew. Of all the information, the most important was the huge bet between the Tao family and the Lu family, as well as the scene where the white sugar made by the young lady shocked everyone and even sold for a high price. By the way, our shop in the county now, Gus, used to belong to the Tao family. Dajiang really didn't know that there were so many grudges between them. Nor did he know that Yundong had already formed a feud with the second young master of the Tao family. As expected, the Tao family was really despicable. The Lu family had a powerful background. Yundong had told him about this before. Dajiang felt that the Tao family, which could challenge the Lu family, definitely had a backer too. Of course, their backer might not be as strong as the Lu families. However, compared to the Gu family, the Tao family alone was enough to crush them into the soil. If one day, the Tao family suddenly thought of Shao Qingyuan, their son, and found out that not only was he not depressed, but he was also becoming more and more promising. He even had money and a beautiful wife. Wouldn't they think of ways to deal with him? Not only him, but even Dajiang's daughter would become their target. Perhaps they might as well settle the old and new scores together. When Dajiang thought of this, he felt a little anxious. As expected, Yundong was right. Their family didn't lack money now, but they lacked connections and background. No, he had to quickly read. In 2 days, he would go to the academy in the Prefectural city to meet Mountain Elder Qi. If he passed the test, he would be able to study in the academy and strive to take the imperial examination as soon as possible. Not to mention how high his ranking was, even if he was an elementary scholar, he would still have a good title. As Dajiang thought about it, he simply stood up and went to the bookcase to get the books Yuanzhi had given him. Although he had been very busy for the past 2 days, he had taken the time to read a book. Yuanzhi had given him books that he had read before. There were many notes on them. To Dajiang, these were very rare and precious things. Tong'an and Rong found it strange that their master had suddenly become diligent. However, they did not ask further and quietly left the room. Chapter 583. Going to cause trouble soon. 2 days passed in a flash. The Gu family discovered something strange. It was as if the relationship between young Miss and young Master Shao had suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. When they passed by, they could feel the sweet atmosphere between them. It seemed that although old master had made things difficult for young Master Shao, he was indeed building up the relationship between the two young people. Indeed, he had put in a lot of effort. They had all misunderstood him. It was obvious from the fact that old master didn't chase Shao Qingyuan away to the Shao family to recuperate. He was a stubborn but soft-hearted person. Even Aunt Ke thought so. Dajiang was speechless. He felt bitter and didn't want to speak. Shao Qingyuan's recovery ability was strong. At this moment, he was mostly recovered. He could even practice boxing on the ground energetically. He felt that this illness was worth it. The knot in his heart that had been kept for many years was untied. Yundong seemed to love him more and more. Well, this wasn't an illusion. After he recovered, he dealt with the 2 baskets of herbs he had picked on the mountain. Unfortunately, he still did not find Bai Muzi on this trip up the mountain. Otherwise, that would be the best betrothal gift for the Gu family. Shao Qingyuan sighed in his heart. After packing up the herbs, he washed his hands and asked a Mao to gather the other 3. A Mao seemed to know what he was going to do and asked excitedly, "Young master, are you going to the Li family to settle scores with them?" Shao Qingyuan rolled up his sleeves. The clothes he was wearing now were still the old clothes from before. He didn't know if it was because his life had been better recently, or maybe because his food had improved, but he seemed to have grown taller and stronger, and his clothes didn't seem to fit him well. However, it was finding trouble with someone. What if there was blood? Yundong had bought all his good new clothes for him. He couldn't dirty them. Hearing Ah Mao's question, he nodded. Ah Mao immediately jumped up and went to pull Ah Go and the other 2 back. When they heard that they were going to the Li family, they all began to rub their fists and turn their heads to look for suitable tools. When they walked out of the Shao family's house, Zhu couldn't help but ask, "Young master, Miss went to the neighboring village today and hasn't returned. Why don't we wait for Miss to come back first?" That's right. Let Miss see our mighty and majestic appearance." "What do you know?" Ah Mao patted Zhu and Shu and said with an unfathomable expression, "This scene will be too cruel. What if it scares her?" Shao Qingyuan glanced at him, and everyone saw him nod in agreement. Shu and the other 2 felt like their jaws were about to drop. Wait, with Miss Personality, would she be afraid? She was not human when she was savage, all right? When they thought of the tragic fate of the old Gu family and Gu Gang's family in Gu village, they would even shiver. However, forget it. Who asked young master to care too much about his image? They would reluctantly cooperate. The weather was very hot, so it was not very late. Occasionally, villagers would carry hoes and baskets back from the fields. Seeing Shao Qingyuan walk towards the Li family expressionlessly, their hearts couldn't help but skip a beat. Felt like something big was about to happen. Soon, the villagers of Yongfu village seemed to have discovered something extraordinary. They quickly spread the news. Shao Qingyuan was about to cause trouble. Chapter 584. Finding the Li family was located in the west of Yongfu village. It was a little far from the Gu and Shao families. When Shao Qingyuan and the others arrived, the Li family happened to return from the fields. When he saw the few people suddenly standing outside the door, eldest Li's eyes widened and he almost screamed. He immediately took 2 steps back. What are you doing here? We agreed in the past that we would mind our own business. Are you going back on your word?" Shao Qingyuan glanced at him coldly and did not say anything. He pushed the eldest son of the Li family to the side and kicked open the Li family's courtyard door. He had never been a talkative person and had always acted directly. Especially when it came to people he hated, he had no patience at all. On the other hand, Ah Mao sneered at eldest Li. "You also said that you should mind your own business. Then what did you say to Master Gu out of the blue? Do you need me to remind you?" Eldest Li's face turned pale. Gu Dajiang had indeed said it. He had really told others about what happened that day. The past few days had been peaceful. Eldest Li thought that Gu Dajiang had listened to his provocation and didn't tell Shao Qingyuan. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to relax, Shao Qingyuan actually brought someone to his door. "Ah!" A scream came from inside, instantly pulling eldest Li back to his senses. He hurriedly walked in and saw Shao Qingyuan removing the door. Madame Bao was looking at him in horror. Eldest Li ran in quickly. When he thought of how Shao Qingyuan had also broken into their house 5 years ago and smashed the entire Li house into pieces, and how he had almost crippled him, eldest Li instantly felt his legs go weak. He was wrong. After 5 years of peace, he was a little arrogant and couldn't hold it in anymore. Shao Qingyuan didn't say anything. He entered the central room and sneered. Ah Mao and the others immediately ran in and pulled out Li Debao and Li Erbao, who were hiding in fear. Li Debao was 14 years old. He looked tall, but he did not have much strength. A Mao could easily lift him up alone. Li Erbao was 11 years old. When a Go pulled him out, he immediately scolded fiercely, "You dog! Let go of me. Otherwise I won't be polite." When Madame Bao saw that her two precious sons were in the other party's hands, she immediately shouted and pounced at Shao Qingyuan. She was pushed away by Zhu and Shu. Madame Bao sat on the ground. "Bandits! Help! Shao Qingyuan, this ingrate is unfilial. He wants to murder his father and mother." "Father, mother?" Shao Qingyuan glanced at them and suddenly punched Li Erbao's stomach. Li Erbao almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes began to roll back. Madame Bao's expression changed. "Stop! Stop! Don't hit him. 5 years ago, I said that if you come after me again, you'll find trouble with your sons. I thought you should remember it very clearly." A Mao grinned. "It must be because he's old that his memory is failing him. That's fine. They'll give you another warning today. If you get beaten up too often, you'll remember it," Shu replied. As they spoke, many people had already arrived outside the Li family's door. Some people couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to go over to say a few words, but they were immediately stopped by the people beside them. "Don't go. That's Shao Qingyuan. Do you want to be beaten up?" But that person seemed to have escaped here. In fact, he did not know Shao Qingyuan's character very well. He only felt that it was not good to barge into someone's house and hit them. Unexpectedly, at this moment, someone suddenly ran out of the kitchen with scissors in his hand and rushed towards Shao Qingyuan. Chapter 585. Gu Yundong is here. The person at the door was shocked. He took a closer look and realized that it was the 6-year-old girl from the Li family. Whoa! This young lady had a vicious look on her face at such a young age. If she stabbed the sharp scissors in her hand, wouldn't the victim lose half of his life? However, Shao Qingyuan didn't even look at her before she was grabbed by Shu. He pinched her wrist and turned it gently. As Li Chunyan screamed, he snatched the scissors away. Li Chunyan, who was 6 years old, scolded Shao Qingyuan fiercely. "You ingrate. Hurry up and make this dog let go of me. Otherwise, I'll kill you and stab you to death with scissors." Everyone at the door was stunned. Wasn't this a 6-year-old girl? Why was she so vicious with her vulgarities? Li Chunyan hated Shao Qingyuan because she had heard from her parents that she could have been a boy and could have been pampered by her parents. It was all because she had been restrained by Shao Qingyuan that she became the daughter of the family. Although her parents treated her well, she could not compare to her 2 brothers. At the very least, her 2 brothers did not have to work. Li Chunyan pushed all the blame to Shao Qingyuan. In the past, she had secretly gone to see him, thinking that she would definitely find an opportunity to teach him a lesson. She did not expect him to come to her house. It was a pity that she did not stab him to death just now. It was too regretful. However, her actions made Mao and the others feel a chill down their spines. Even the other villagers outside the door looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Someone quickly went to call the village chief, and someone went to summon the 2nd and 3rd branches of the Li family next door. The 2nd and 3rd branches had already split up when the Li family's old master passed away. Although their newly built houses were next door, they did not have much interaction with the 1st branch. It wasn't that they didn't know what the eldest branch had done to Shao Qingyuan, but Shao Qingyuan was not related to them. They didn't have to offend their narrow-minded brother and sister-in-law to help him. Anyway, the old master doted on him. Moreover, in the past, the old man had given him good things alone, and his own grandchildren could not eat them. This made the 2nd and 3rd branches complain. However, it was not to the extent of killing people like the 1st branch did. At most, they would watch coldly and say some sarcastic words to complain. At this moment, Shao Qingyuan had come to the Li family and caused such a huge commotion. They lived next door, so how could they not know? They just did not want to get involved. When someone came to call them, they reluctantly stepped forward and advised without much sincerity. "Qingyuan, no matter what, eldest brother and sister-in-law are your adoptive parents. What are outsiders going to say about you? You'll be scolded for being unfilial." "That's right. If the Gu family finds out about this, will Miss Gu still marry you?" Let go first. If there's anything, sit down and talk. It was fine if they did not mention Gu Yundong, but when she was mentioned, Shao Qingyuan's eyes turned even colder. He turned his head and punched Li Debao in the stomach. Eldest Li and Madame Bao screamed. Shao Qingyuan, stop, stop. What do you want? We apologize. Okay? The second and third branches of the Li family immediately did not dare to speak. Instead, the discussion outside the door kept buzzing. Why do I feel that Shao Qingyuan's actions are a little familiar? That's right, that's right. Especially, the more you call your parents, the more miserably you will be beaten. Because I've done it before. A low laugh suddenly sounded behind everyone. Chapter 586. For Gu Yundong's good, everyone turned around and saw Gu Yundong standing behind them with a smile. Someone widened his eyes and called out, "Miss Gu." His voice was so loud that it instantly diverted the attention of everyone in the courtyard. Shao Qingyuan looked at her in surprise, but he quickly calmed down. On the other hand, a Mao, a Go and the others suddenly panicked and whispered, "What should we do? Is Miss back? Didn't she go to the neighboring village to look at the orchard? At the very least, she should be back in the afternoon. Why is she so early? What's more, she saw us. We haven't even done anything. What do we do now?" Their voices were not loud, but Madame Bao still heard them. She immediately understood that Shao Qingyuan had taken advantage of the fact that Miss Gu was not around to come to her house to lord over them. Therefore, Shao Qingyuan was indeed worried that Miss Gu would see his bad side. At this moment, she felt that she was not afraid even if her son and daughter were in Shao Qingyuan's hands. In front of Gu Yundong, Shao Qingyuan would definitely not dare to attack again. The malice in Madame Bao's heart instantly rose crazily. She suddenly turned her head and said to Gu Yundong, "Miss Gu, did you see that? Did you see that? We didn't do anything." But Shao Qingyuan was unwilling to let us off. "My two sons are so young, and my daughter is only 6 years old. These men bullied our family of old and weak. Their consciences have been eaten by dogs." As she spoke, she started crying. Shao Qingyuan glanced coldly at the pretentious Madame Bao. When he looked up at Gu Yundong, his gaze softened again. However, a Mao was furious and scolded her angrily. "What do you mean by you didn't do anything? Your man ran to the Gu family's old master and spoke ill of our young master. He smeared his reputation and tried to sow discord between him and Miss Gu. How can this be called not doing anything?" "That's right. If it weren't for your dirty tricks, we wouldn't have bothered with you. Also, old and weak. There were a total of 3 men, okay?" Everyone outside the door started to discuss. Chen Liang also came. He stood at the door and frowned fiercely. He finally squeezed in from the outside and shouted at the people in the courtyard. "Why are you making a fuss? Do you have nothing better to do on such a hot day?" However, Madame Bao ignored him. Seeing that Shao Qingyuan did not hit anyone after what she had said, she immediately became more confident. She argued with a Mao. "What do you mean by sowing discord? Did my man say something wrong? Shao Qingyuan is an ingrate to begin with. Look at what he did. Which one of the accusations isn't true? Why don't you ask everyone if my father-in-law dug his heart out for him and treated him better than a biological grandson? In the end, my father-in-law was seriously ill and this guy didn't take care of him. Even after he died, he was thrown into our house and this guy went back to eat and drink?" Eldest Li nodded as well. That's right. I went to look for Gu Dajiang for the sake of the Gu family. We can't bear to see a good lady like Miss Gu ruined like this." Everyone's discussion became even louder. Eldest Li and his wife were right about those things. Shao Qingyuan really left old Master Li alone. The buzzing sound entered Gu Yundong's ears, but it made her anger rise bit by bit. She tightened her grip and slowly walked into the courtyard. Seeing this, Chen Liang immediately said worriedly, "Yundong, calm down first. There might be a secret behind this. You know Qingyuan's character." Madame Bao was furious. Chen Liang actually protected Shao Qingyuan. She stood up abruptly. "Miss Gu, you have no idea how terrifying Shao Qingyuan is." Chapter 587. Terrifying thinking. Gu Yundong nodded in agreement. I really don't know how terrifying he is. Madame Bao instantly smiled and looked at Shao Qingyuan maliciously. But then, Gu Yundong's voice turned cold. She changed the topic and said sharply, "But I do know how scary your Li family is." The smile on Madame Bao's face froze. She turned to look at Gu Yundong in surprise. What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" Gu Yundong sneered. "Have you forgotten that when Shao Qingyuan was 5 years old, you threw the weak child into the mountains to feed the wolves just because of a nightmare? You treated human lives like grass and were inhumane." The villagers watching outside the courtyard instantly widened their eyes. The Li family's eldest branch had once thrown the 5-year-old Shao Qingyuan into the mountains to feed the wolves? Even Chun Liang looked at Gu Yundong in surprise. Then he suddenly faced Madame Bao. Eldest Li and his wife turned pale and were about to retort. Unexpectedly, Gu Yundong quickly said, "Or have you forgotten that when Shao Qingyuan was 8 years old, you colluded with the human traffickers in the county and sold him to them, almost making him unable to come back?" Madame Bao retorted almost subconsciously, "We didn't take a single cent. It's not considered selling." Gu Yundong laughed. "So, you admit to colluding with the human traffickers?" "I..." Only then did Madame Bao realize that she had said something she shouldn't have. There was no chance to deny it anymore. The villagers gasped in unison. They did not know that the Li family had actually done such a thing. Someone could not help but look at the people from the second and third branches and ask, "Is it true? Eldest Li and his wife really..." Of course, the second and third branches knew what had happened back then. They lived in the same house and were not deaf or blind. However, in the face of everyone's questions, they only lowered their heads and stammered, "We don't know. How could we know what they did?" With that, they rushed back. They did not care if the eldest branch was dead or alive. They were very selfish. However, the villagers had completely believed this. Previously, when they heard that eldest Li had thrown Shao Qingyuan into the mountains, they could still condemn him for his ruthlessness. However, it was none of their business. Other than scolding him ruthlessly, they could not do anything else. But that was not the case for the latter part. Colluding with the human traffickers? The person who was sold back then was Shao Qingyuan. Then, would their own child be sold someday if they had a grudge against elderly? At the thought of this, the villagers were filled with wariness and anger towards the Li family. Coupled with the fact that Li Chunyen, who was only 6 years old, dared to kill someone with a pair of scissors. Was this hereditary? This family was hard-hearted and ruthless. There were some things that couldn't be thought about. The more they thought about it, the more terrifying it became. For example, when Li Debao and Li Erbao played with the others in the village, they would fight with them since they were young. In the past, everyone did not take it seriously, but now that they thought about it, didn't the kids beat others up until they were covered in injuries? That was when they were young. If there was a conflict when they grew up, would they greet others with knives? Also, was Old Master Li really as kind as he looked to Shao Qingyuan? If Old Master Li treated him well, would Shao Qingyuan leave him alone? Someone couldn't help but ask. Then, did Old Master Li know about these things? Chapter 588. Gu Yundong's Brainwashing. That's a good question. Gu Yundong smiled at the man with an unfathomable expression. What do you think? That person looked at Gu Yundong's expression and could not help but swallow his saliva. He nodded almost subconsciously. Yes, the second and third branches of the Li family definitely knew about that, considering the evasive and guilty look in their eyes. As for the old master of the Li family who doted on Shao Qingyuan the most, how could he not know? Eldest Li and his wife had harmed Shao Qingyuan twice, but Old Master Li still let Shao Qingyuan stay in the Li family. When Shao Qingyuan was 13 years old, he had to move away at all costs. Shao Qingyuan was so determined. Could it be that when he was 13 years old, he was persecuted by the Li couple? Some people thought deeply. As soon as the timeline was considered, they would know that every time Madame Bao was about to give birth, they would attack Shao Qingyuan. When you were pregnant, you actually harmed another child. Weren't you afraid of retribution? A soft-hearted woman cursed. Retribution? What retribution? Li Chunyen jumped on her toes and shouted. When I was born, Shao Qingyuan was still in Yongfu village. That's why I became a girl. This ingrate deserves to die. He jinxed us and harmed me. Everyone looked at her in disbelief. Was this what a 6-year-old child should say? What did the Li couple usually teach her? Yundong glanced at Li Chunyan and smiled. You might be mistaken. Not only did Shao Qingyuan not restrain you, but if he hadn't come to your house, would your Li family have Li Debao and Li Erbao? Think about it. Before Shao Qingyuan came, didn't your mother give birth to 3 daughters? But after he came, the children your mother was pregnant with were all boys. Li Debao and Li Erbao were brought over by Shao Qingyuan. As for you, I think Shao Qingyuan cut ties with the Li family and changed his surname to Shao before he was born? You became a daughter because he left. So all of this is your parents' fault. It was your parents who caused all this. Li Chunyan was stunned. She was only 6 years old after all. Previously, when she heard the Li couple repeatedly mention Shao Qingyuan's bad, she felt that it was Shao Qingyuan's fault. But now, Yundong's words seemed to be able to brainwash her. She actually felt that. She was right. Not only her, but even the surrounding villagers felt that it made sense. Therefore, the first branch of the Li family indeed suffered retribution. However, eldest Li and Madame Bao did not think so. The thoughts had been deeply rooted in their minds for more than 10 years. How could they be overturned by Yundong's words? If that was the case, wouldn't they have done something wrong all these years? Madame Bao immediately screamed and retorted, No, Shao Qingyuan jinxed us. It's his fault. She suddenly looked at Yundong. Don't spout nonsense here and distort the truth. Distorting the truth? Yundong raised her eyebrows. Didn't you personally admit that you colluded with the human traffickers just now? Everyone heard it just now, didn't they? The onlookers immediately nodded. That's right, eldest Li. You guys are too ruthless and scary. Village chief, such people should be drowned in a pig cage. They're murderers. I'm afraid when I think about how I stay in the same village with them every day. That's right. I can't even sleep well. If our children are harmed by them when they go out one day, I won't even have a place to cry. Village chief, you can't let them off. One after another, the 2 of them became the target of public criticism. They were stunned. Chapter 589. Someone is about to die. How did it become like this? The entire village looked at them with disgust and even wanted to punish them. No. Eldest Li and his wife's heads buzzed and they lost their rationality. They suddenly looked at Yundong. It's all your fault. It's all your fault, you be *tch. Alright, if you don't let me have an easy time, don't think about having an easy time either. They could not defeat Shao Qingyuan, but Yundong, a little girl, would not have an easy time. Madame Bao and eldest Li moved almost at the same time. They stood up and rushed towards Yundong. Madame Bao even stretched out her sharp black nails to grab Yundong's face. Eldest Li also grabbed a hoe at the side and smashed it down. Yundong was close to them. When she saw them rushing over, she did not dodge. When the villagers saw this, they all shouted in surprise, Lady Gu, be careful. Chun Liang was in the courtyard and was not standing far away. He rushed over without thinking. But he had only taken 2 steps when he saw Yundong twist Madame Bao's arm and prop her up on his shoulder. She then kicked eldest Li, who had rushed over, and sent him flying. After her feet landed on the ground, she started punching Madame Bao. You dare to fight me? You're blind and have no memory. Have you forgotten how I dealt with the 4 bastards back then? Everyone was speechless. They had indeed forgotten about it previously. Now they remembered. As Shao Qingyuan was standing in the central room and was blocked by Ashu and the others, when he came out, he saw eldest Li, who had been kicked away. His eyes suddenly turned cold. He saw that eldest Li was about to stand up and rush towards Yundong again. Shao Qingyuan immediately reached out, grabbed his hair, and slammed him to the ground. Bang! Eldest Li's back was slammed heavily onto the ground, raising a thick layer of dust. He coughed twice. Before he could open his eyes, he was punched hard in the face. Oh, it hurts. Don't hit me. Shao Qingyuan's fists came one after another. His movements were quick and nimble as they landed on eldest Li, Chun Liang, and the villagers were originally focused on Yundong and Madame Bao. They watched as Madame Bao was beaten to the ground by Gu Yundong. Before they could sigh, they were distracted by another shrill cry. In the next moment, everyone widened their eyes and sucked in a cold breath. Everyone only knew that Shao Qingyuan was a wolf cub. He could even kill children and was cruel. However, most of them had heard about it and only felt that this person's reputation was not good. In any case, they usually stayed away from him. Now, it was the first time they had seen him beat someone up so fiercely. His fists were like stones, and his body emitted a violent and murderous aura. With just a few punches, eldest Li's face was already covered in blood. Everyone was frightened and shuddered. They did not move and did not dare to say a word. Chunliang was the first to react. He immediately shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and pull him away. Hurry up and pull him away. Someone is going to die." The onlookers outside were suddenly jolted awake, and 3 to 4 burly men instantly squeezed in. However, Shao Qingyuan raised his head and looked at them coldly. The coldness in his eyes made them stop in their tracks. However, Shao Qingyuan's fist did not stop hitting eldest Li. Chunliang could not get him to stop, so he could only go up himself. "Qingyuan, stop. Calm down first. Let's talk things out." Chapter 590. Too tragic. Gu Yundong was afraid that Shao Qingyuan would accidentally hit him if he went forward like this. She quickly let go of Madame Bao and went forward to hold Chunliang back. Chunliang turned his head and called out to her, "Yundong, quickly make him stop. If someone really dies, Qingyuan will have to go to jail." Gu Yundong knew that Shao Qingyuan had self-control, so she shook her head. "It's fine. No one will die." "Aya, why are you also?" Chunliang had a headache. The others did not dare to stop him. Yundong did not want to persuade him, but as the village chief, he could not just watch. As he called the villagers forward, he tried to break free from Gu Yundong's jimpi. Seeing this, Mao and the others let go of Li Debao and the other two, who were already scared silly. They quickly walked over and stopped Chunliang and the villagers who were moving forward hesitantly. "Uncle Chun, don't be hasty. Don't go forward lest you get hurt." Yes. Uncle Chun, why don't you go over there and sit for a while?" "Sit? Why would he sit? Did they want him to watch the show over there?" Chunliang glared at them one by one. After all, he was the village chief. Mao and the other 3 did not dare to be impudent. They blocked him weakly and did not dare to use force. However, this was enough. Shao Qingyuan had already knocked out 3 of eldest Li's teeth. Madame Bao stumbled over. When she saw eldest Li's miserable state, her legs immediately went weak and she fell to the ground. Stop it. Shao Qingyuan. Stop. Boo-hoo." She wanted to stop him, but when she met Shao Qingyuan's bloodshot eyes, she was so frightened that she peed her pants. Li Debao and his brother were trembling. They had never seen Shao Qingyuan like this, not to mention Li Chunyan. At this moment, she didn't dare to find trouble with him. She only hoped that he wouldn't see her for the rest of his life. She shrank into a corner and didn't even dare to raise her head. Shao Qingyuan finally stopped before Chunliang arrived. He glanced at Madame Bao. "Now, do you remember what I said in the past?" "Yes, I do. We want dare to leave. We want dare to do it again." They were afraid. Shao Qingyuan was too terrifying. He was 100 times more terrifying than the last time he rushed into their house and smashed it. She was sure that if there was a next time, Shao Qingyuan would definitely kill them. "If you dare to attack Yundong again, I will take your lives." Shao Qingyuan stood up expressionlessly. Under Madame Bao's crazily nodding gaze, he gently stepped over eldest Li's knee. "Ah!" Big Li cried out in pain. Finally, he could not hold on anymore and fainted. Shao Qingyuan frowned and looked at the blood on his hand. He came to Gu Yundong's side and asked, "Are we going back?" "Let's go back." Shao Qingyuan led her out. The villagers at the door automatically made way for them and watched silently as they left. There was no one in front of Chunliang to block him. He looked at Shao Qingyuan and Gu Yundong's backs as they left, then at eldest Li, who was lying on the ground unconscious, and Madame Bao, who had almost fainted from crying. He suddenly slapped his thigh. "What's going on? However, he could not care less now. Chun Liang quickly got someone to carry eldest Li to the doctor. The people from the Li family's second and third branches had never appeared from the beginning to the end. They hid in the house and trembled. Yundong did not pay attention to what happened after that, but Mao and the others told her the news excitedly. Chapter 591. Ending eldest Li's life was indeed not in danger, but he was also not in a good state. 3 of his teeth had been knocked out, and the doctor had found dog teeth to fix on him. The 3 teeth were very expensive, and he had paid more than 10 taels of silver. There would be other expenses in the future, not to mention the broken leg that Shao Qingyuan had stepped on. Yes, that leg was broken. From then on, eldest Li could only move with a walking stick. He could not do any work in the fields. The Li family's reputation in the village had also been tarnished. Although no one wanted them to be punished, no one was willing to interact with them. Madame Bao went to borrow money from others, but she was almost always blocked out. Li Debao and his siblings did not have a single friend in Yongfu village who was willing to play with them. Because eldest Li was seriously injured and bedridden, Li Debao and his siblings had to work in the fields. They began to complain day by day. As for the 3 married daughters of the Li family, it was said that none of them had come back to visit their parents. In fact, when Madame Bao came to look for them, they directly refused and pretended as if there was no one at home. Yundong felt that this was retribution. Look, the children they raised were all ingrates. This was what it meant to be ingrates. If they had treated Shao Qingyuan well back then, their life would have been so good now. They deserved it. Yundong heaved a sigh of relief. It was a pity that old Li had died early and could not see this scene. Actually, she had really considered whether she should dig him out and whip his corpse. Yundong, do you think I can really pass? When Dajiang entered, he saw his daughter thinking about something with a serious expression. He thought that she was thinking the same thing as him. After all, they had to set off for the Prefectural city tomorrow to find the mountain elder of the Tianhai Academy to settle the matter of enrollment. Yundong suddenly came back to her senses and immediately nodded with certainty. Of course. Father, didn't you read all the books that Master Qin gave you? Master Qin said that father is talented. He only gave you the recommendation letter because he felt that you must be capable. My father is the best. After Dajiang received his daughter's affirmation, his face immediately flushed red. When he saw his daughter's adoring gaze, he immediately felt smug. All right, I'll go back and practice my calligraphy. As he spoke, he turned around and left. The corners of Yundong's mouth twitched. Her father's handwriting was actually very good. He had been an accountant for many years. He might not have read enough books, but he had written a lot of words. The next day, the group prepared to head to the Prefectural city. Other than accompanying her father to the academy, Yundong also had to visit the shop. Shao Qingyuan felt that they needed protection, so he packed his bags and followed them. Dajiang and Madame Yang couldn't bear to part, so they had to go together. Yunka had already climbed into the carriage. Her soft little face was hidden behind the curtain of the carriage, as if no one could see her and they could not keep her at home. Aunt Ku was going back to the prefecture capital. Yundong also brought Shuirong and Tong Shuitao along. Shuirong followed beside Dajiang as a page boy. This time, Shao Qingyuan brought Zhu and Shu along. Last time, he brought Mao along with him. There were a lot of people, so they were divided into 2 carriages. Seeing that there was nothing left, the group set off majestically and left Yongfu village. There were many people standing outside the Gu family's workshop. Someone who was well informed said with a face full of emotion, I heard that the boss is going to open a shop in the Prefectural city this time. Tell me, how long has it been? The boss is actually opening a shop in the Prefectural city. It's amazing. Chapter 592. Zhuangzi as shopkeeper last time. The owner said that when she goes to the Prefectural city to open a shop, our workshop will recruit more people. Is it going to start when the owner comes back? I'm sure it is. I'll go home today and tell my maternal cousins to be prepared. Yes. This is a rare opportunity. After they recruit someone this time, we don't know when the next time will be. Everyone spoke one after another, and a few of them thought too much. There were more and more people in this workshop. Tong and alone would definitely not be able to manage it. When the time came, the boss would definitely find someone to manage it, even if it was a junior manager. Hence, for the sake of a good impression, everyone worked extra hard these few days. However, Yundong did not know that the long-term workers in her small workshop had started to work hard. She sat in the carriage and held little Yunka in her arms. After the young lady confirmed that she could go to the prefectural city, she was overjoyed. When the carriage reached the county city, Yundong went to Gus first. As soon as they got off the carriage, she heard Zhuangzi's arrogant voice. Yes, yes, yes. You have to wipe it clean over there. Our shop sells food. Cleanliness is the most important. When there are no customers, wash and wipe everything. Be more efficient and diligent. Only then will the customers be in a good mood, right? The corners of Yundong's mouth twitched. She heard Zhuangzi continue, Jin Kai, don't blame me for saying too much. I'm doing this for your own good. When I was the shop assistant, this was how I was trained. You'll get used to it. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Yundong enter. His expression immediately changed and he welcomed her with a smile. Boss, why are you here? Yundong looked at the shop. It was not bad, but Zhuangzi's attitude of becoming the owner was really annoying. Chen Jinkai also stopped what he was doing and came over. He had been working here for a few days and was slowly familiarizing himself with the work in the shop. He looked very energetic. Yundong took a few more glances at him and realized that there was no dissatisfaction on his face. He seemed to have calmed down a lot. Not bad. Yundong nodded and asked Zhuangzi, Where's Uncle Zheng? He's in the backyard. I'll go get him. After saying that, he ran away. Zhang Gang almost did not care about the matters in the shop these few days and let Zhuangzi do whatever he wanted. He only gave him a few pointers when necessary. He spent most of his time counting goods in the warehouse at the back, or simply buying a few vegetables to cook himself. A few days passed quickly. When Yundong went to the prefectural city, she naturally had to bring Zhang Gang along. He was familiar with the prefectural city, so she had to bring him along when they decided on the location of the shop. 2 days ago, Yundong had already informed Zhang Gang. He should have packed up at this time. Seeing Zhuangzi run into the backyard, Yundong looked at Chen Jinkai. Brother Chen, are you used to being here? Everything is fine. Yundong raised her eyebrows. I heard Zhuangzi ordering you around even before I came in. He seemed very arrogant. The shop assistant, Jiang Bao, who was sending the guests out of the pharmacy next door, happened to hear this and immediately stopped in his tracks. He had already established a deep friendship with Zhuangzi. Of course, he was on his side. Seeing that his boss' future wife was asking the new employee a question in private, he immediately perked up his ears. Alright, he wanted to see what this person would say about Zhuangzi behind Zhuangzi's back. Chapter 593. You're smart. Chen Jinkai smiled and said nonchalantly, It's quite good. I started as a small shop assistant in town in the past. At that time, the manager was even more impolite to me. Zhuangzi was just a little strict with his words. He didn't hide anything from me. He was telling the truth. In the beginning, he was also prepared to deal with all kinds of difficulties and torture. Moreover, the other party was Zhuangzi. Chen Jinkai had seen too many people who became conceited after gaining power. For example, Chen Yulan's husband, Wu Chong. Last time, he had eyes that could reach the sky when he visited the Qin family. Therefore, he thought that Zhuangzi, who was just a hooligan that had often been humiliated and mocked by him in the past, would definitely not be polite to him. He did not care about these things, but he was afraid that Zhuangzi would not teach him anything, let him do what he should do, or let him understand what he should understand. That was the worst. Unexpectedly, Zhuangzi would indeed mock and ridicule him. He would often bring up the past in a few sentences to attack him. However, Chen Jinkai was someone who had been in charge before. Some things were not on the surface. Zhuangzi was actually bluffing. The guy did not hesitate to take care of him. If he did not understand, as long as he asked, Zhuangzi would explain everything to him. This surprised Chen Jinkai and made him feel exceptionally at ease. Although he had only been in the shop for a few days, he felt more comfortable than when he was a small manager in the town workshop. Therefore, he worked harder. Yundong did not expect him to have such a high evaluation of Zhuangzi. It seemed that Chen Jingkai's decision to work under Zhuangzi was not wrong. Both of them could be trained. Jiang Bao, who was eavesdropping outside the door, secretly sneered. At least you know your place. Then he entered the pharmacy worriedly. When he saw the manager of the pharmacy who was talking to boss Shao, his heart tightened. Zhuangzi had already become a manager. When could he go up? However, on second thought, he felt that it was unrealistic. A pharmacy was different from ordinary shops. As a shopkeeper, not only did he have to manage the shop, but he also had to know medicine. He could only be considered an apprentice now. There were still many things he needed to understand. However, his boss' future wife would go to the prefectural city to open a shop. He guessed that his boss would follow her soon. At that time, while Jiang Bao was enjoying himself, Zhuangzi from the shop next door had already brought Zheng Gang over. Zheng Gang was carrying a bag in his hand. He was wearing clean and decent clothes and looked very energetic. It looked like he was full of enthusiasm for returning to the prefectural city. "Boss, I'm done packing. We can leave now." "Okay." Yundong nodded and instructed Zhuangzi and Chen Jingkai to do their best. She saw that Zhuangzi was a little nervous. After all, Zheng Gang had really abandoned his job this time. It was normal for him to feel uneasy if he wanted to be independent. However, after such a long period of training, there was definitely no problem. Yundong led Zheng Gang out and let him follow Shao Qingyuan, who had also come out of the pharmacy, into another carriage. The two carriages were separated by gender. Yundong, Madame Yang, and the other women sat in one, while Dajiang, Shao Qingyuan, and the other men sat in the other. The father-in-law and son-in-law did not talk much along the way. Now that Zheng Gang was here, the atmosphere was finally much more relaxed. Yundong shook her head secretly. Just as she was about to get into the carriage, Zhuangzi, who had sent them out, suddenly spoke. "Boss." Yundong paused and turned to look at him. "What's wrong?" "Last time. I've already considered what you asked me to consider last time." Chapter 594. Zhuangzi's decision. Yundong raised her eyebrows. "What do you think?" Zhuangzi took a deep breath. "I want to go to the prefectural city and continue working for Shopkeeper Zheng." He raised his head. When he spoke, the expression between his brows was exceptionally firm. It seemed like he had made up his mind. Yundong was not surprised at all. "Have you thought it through? Will you regret it?" "No." Zhuangzi grinned. "Although being a shopkeeper has always been my goal, I have a bigger goal now." Yundong was suspicious. "Why? Could it be that you want to be the boss now?" Zhuangzi clenched his fists. "I want to be a shopkeeper in the prefecture capital." Yundong was speechless. It was indeed a bigger goal. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. She tried her best to nod with a straight face. "All right, it's good that you've thought it through. However, you still have to work hard in the county city for the next 3 months. You're not allowed to slack off. You can go to the prefectural city in 3 months. All right, tell your parents about this so that they won't worry." "I've told them. Father and mother support me very much." Actually, the reason why Zhuangzi had said that he would consider it was not only because of the rare position of shopkeeper, but also because he was worried about his parents and sister. Sherdashin and his wife were weak. Although Zhuangzi expected better from them, he had been protecting them. In the past, when he was a hooligan, he could directly go to people's houses to teach those who bullied his parents a lesson. Later on, he stopped being a hooligan and became a shop assistant. However, he could still go home every 2 to 3 days. He knew the situation at home and could help. If he went to the prefectural city and only returned once every month, he would regret it if anything happened to his parents and he couldn't help. Later, when Sherdashin and his wife found out that Yundong wanted him to work in the prefectural city, they tried their best to persuade him to accept. Although he was still an assistant, he would see the world in the prefectural city and would only improve in the future. This was their son's future. How could they stop him? Moreover, ever since they helped the Gu family manage the orchard, be it the villagers or their relatives, nobody mocked them any longer. Everybody wanted them to help put in a few good words in front of the boss, so that they could enter the Gu family's workshop. Only then did Zhuangzi realize that his family's situation had improved a lot. He should have trusted Gu Yundong. With her around, she would not let anyone bully the Shi family. Therefore, Zhuangzi decided to go to the prefectural city to see the world. Moreover, he had also thought about it. When he became the shopkeeper of the prefectural city in the future, he could buy a house in the prefectural city and bring his parents over to enjoy life. His parents had never left Fengkai County in their lives. He had to let them see the prosperity of the prefecture city, right? Zhuangzi knew his parents very well. He knew that although they were very good at planting fruit trees, they were actually not suitable to be managers. In the future, the owner's orchard would only grow bigger and bigger. They would definitely find more capable people to help. As far as he knew, Uncle Zhao was very eye-catching to the boss. Of course, Zhuangzi was happy that Uncle Zhao's family could rise. His son, Goshing, was his good friend. If they could get rich, everyone could get rich together. Seeing that he had thought it through, Gu Yundong nodded. That's good. As she spoke, she bade farewell to Zhuangzi and was helped into the carriage by Tong Shuetao. When the carriage went further and further away and was almost out of sight, Zhuangzi suddenly turned around and entered the shop. He said to Chun Jinkai, "You still don't admit that you're stupid. When the boss came just now, why didn't you pour a glass of water? You're really stupid." He was just a shopkeeper for 3 months. No matter what, he had to satisfy himself first. Chun Jinkai,